You rise before dawn, in the deep stillness that comes just before the first birds begin their tentative calls. The cottage around you is a single room with walls of wattle and daub, a packed earth floor worn smooth by generations of bare feet, and a low ceiling of smoke-darkened beams. The fire in the hearth is sunk to a bed of glowing embers, and by its faint orange light you reach for your clothing laid across the wooden chest at the foot of your straw mattress. The wool of your tunic is rough and warm against your skin as you pull it over your head, the familiar smell of lanolin and wood smoke rising from the fibers. You draw on your soft-patched trousers and tie the drawstring at your waist, then wrap a length of undyed cloth around your neck to keep the morning chill at bay. Your feet find your leather shoes, simple pieces of hide shaped and stitched, and you ease them on without hurry. There is no need for a candle, because the path to the door is as known to your body as the shape of your own breathing, and you cross the room in the dark with the quiet certainty of long habit. Outside, the air meets you like a cold, clean cloth pressed to your face. The village is a cluster of small dwellings and byres strung along a single unpaved lane, and at this hour every shutter is closed, every doorway dark. Even the dogs are still curled in their straw, dreaming whatever dogs dream. The only sound is the distant murmur of the stream that skirts the lower edge of the settlement, a constant watery whisper that never entirely fades. You stand for a moment just beyond your threshold, letting your eyes adjust to the lesser darkness of the open sky, which is the color of a deep slate-blue bowl slowly lightening at its eastern rim. The stars are still out, tiny and cold, but one by one they are beginning to withdraw. You turn left and walk the short distance to the pig pen at the side of the cottage, where the enclosure of woven hazel hurdles stands sturdy and familiar. The pigs hear you coming. They always do, even before your footfalls are audible to your own ears, as if the ground itself carries the message. There are 12 of them, a mix of mature sows, a few young gilts, one patient old boar with a tusk that curls like a crescent moon, and the newest piglet still small enough to slip through the lower gap in the hurdles if it had the mind to try. They stir and grunt softly, their bodies shifting in the deep bed of straw you spread the evening before. You unlatch the gate, a simple wooden bar fitted into 2 notched posts, and swing it inward. The pigs rise together with a communal rustle of straw and bristle, shaking off the sleep that clings to them. Their snouts, wet and questing, push toward you, and you feel the light pressure of their curiosity against your shins. You make a low sound in your throat, not quite a word, a humming note that means come along, and they understand. In a loose, shifting mass of spotted black and pink and mottled brown, they pour through the gate and begin to amble toward the lane. You follow them, and the routine enfolds you. The path leads away from the village and into the fields that have already been shorn of their summer grain, leaving only stubble that glints faintly in the pre-dawn glow. The hedgerows on either side are tall and tangled, a mix of hawthorn, hazel, and bramble, and their leaves still hold the dew that gathered in the night. The ground underfoot is damp, but not muddy, softened by the autumn rains that have been gentle this year, and your shoes leave shallow prints that the pigs' trotters overlay with their own deeper marks. The pigs move at a slow, deliberate pace, their snouts dipping repeatedly to sample the earth, reading the invisible script of scents left by voles and beetles and the roots of wild garlic. They never rush. There is nothing in their world that requires rushing, and so you match your pace to theirs, allowing your own thoughts to slacken and drift. The lane narrows as it approaches the forest, the cultivated land giving way first to rough pasture and then to the outlying trees. The sky in the east has paled to a soft pearl, and a band of pale gold is beginning to spread along the horizon. The first announcement of a sun that has not yet risen. Mist curls around your ankles, rising from the damp ground in slow, silky wreaths. It streams between the tree trunks ahead, softening their edges and making the forest appear to float above a sea of white. You have walked this path so many times that your feet could find the way even if a thick fog rolled in and stole every landmark, and yet each morning the approach feels subtly new, the mist rearranging the shapes of the familiar oaks into something ancient and dreamlike. The pigs sense the change too, their ears pricking forward as they enter the first scatter of acorns that have fallen from the overhanging branches. They begin to root here and there, snouts pushing aside leaves to reveal the dark, glossy nuts, and the sound of their contented grunting grows a little louder. You let them linger because there is no schedule other than the sun's slow climb. You lean against the rough bark of a boundary ash tree and watch the mist drift and coil. The air smells of wet wood and damp soil, with a faint undertone of something green and sappy that speaks of the forest's deep health. The first bird calls start up, a single repeated note from a robin somewhere to your left, then the liquid descending song of a blackbird further in the trees. The sounds are tentative, as if the birds themselves are testing the fabric of the new day before committing to it fully. After a time, you push yourself gently away from the ash and resume walking, and the herd, seeing your movement, flows on ahead once more, a slow river of pigs winding between the trunks. The forest deepens. The trees grow taller and closer together, their canopies interlacing so that the sky becomes a shifting mosaic of blue and green. The oaks are the masters here, massive and ancient, their trunks gnarled and buttressed by centuries of growth. Some have limbs that sweep down almost to the ground before curving up again, and their bark is thick and corky, deeply fissured into patterns that catch the mist and hold it in tiny glistening beads. The ground beneath them is a complex terrain of exposed roots, fallen branches in various stages of decay, and a thick quilt of last year's leaves now faded to a uniform bronze. The pigs navigate this landscape with the ease of creatures born to it, their hooves making a soft rhythmic percussion as they pick their way forward. You step over a root the thickness of your thigh and duck under a low-hanging bough, feeling the brush of a leaf against your cheek. The grove you are heading toward is not far now. It is a natural clearing within the forest, a place where the oaks stand a little apart, and the canopy opens to let in a wide pool of sky. You can tell you are approaching it by the way the light changes, growing brighter and more golden, and by the shift in the ground cover, which becomes deeper and softer underfoot. The mist begins to thinning into streamers that catch the low-angled sunlight and turn briefly to ribbons of amber before dissolving. You step through a final screen of young hazels and arrive. The clearing stretches before you, a broad oval of open ground perhaps 40 paces across, hemmed in by a ring of the largest oaks you have ever known. Their branches arch overhead like the rafters of some great hall, and their leaves, still thick and green though touched here and there with autumn's first bronze, create a dappled roof that shifts and whispers in the lightest breeze. The floor of the grove is a deep carpet of moss, fallen leaves, and acorns, millions of acorns, their caps scattered like tiny discarded cups. A fallen log lies at the edge of the clearing, an old giant that succumbed to wind or age long before you were born, and its upper surface is thickly cushioned with emerald moss, soft as a feather bed. This is your seat, the place you come to each morning, and you make your way toward it while the pigs fan out into the clearing and begin their day's work with an immediate, unhurried devotion. You settle onto the log, the moss giving slightly under your weight, and arrange your cloak so that it covers your legs. The wood of the log is cool and damp, but the moss holds a memory of yesterday's sun, and the combined sensation is pleasant, grounding. You let your shoulders drop and your breathing slow. From this vantage point, you can see the entire herd, the black spotted sow already working a patch near the base of the great central oak, the young gilt with the tawny ear snuffling along a line of exposed roots, the old boar standing motionless for a long moment before lowering his massive head to the ground, and beginning to root with a ponderous dignity. The smallest piglet stays close to its mother, mimicking her movements, its tiny snout pressing into the leaves beside her much larger one. The light strengthens as the sun finally clears the horizon, and the clearing is filled with a honey-colored glow that makes the green of the moss seem almost luminous, and turns each droplet of dew into a tiny prism. You sit and you watch, and the watching becomes a form of rest. The pigs' rooting is a continuous, gentle sound, a rustling and crunching layered over with occasional deep grunts of satisfaction. It is a sound you have known for years, as familiar as your own heartbeat, and it washes over you in slow, regular waves. You notice the way each pig works in its own pattern, one moving in a tight spiral, another in a straight line that goes out and back like a weaver's shuttle. Their snouts are marvels of design, tough and flexible, perfectly suited to turning over leaves and soil, and they work without pause, driven by an appetite that seems both deep and cheerful. The acorns they uncover disappear with a swift crunch, and then the snout moves on to the next pocket of mast, and the next, in a rhythm that is almost hypnotic. The mist has gone now, burned away by the climbing sun, and the forest around the clearing has come to life. A wood pigeon begins its soft five-note coo from somewhere high in the canopy, a sound so repetitive and soothing that it blends into the background like a thread in a tapestry. Small insects dance in the shafts of light, their wings catching the glow and flashing silver before vanishing into shadow. A butterfly, deep brown with eye spots of blue, floats across the clearing and lands on a fern frond near your log, opening and closing its wings with the slow deliberation of a creature that has nowhere else to be. You watch the butterfly for a while, then let your gaze drift back to the pigs, who have shifted their positions only slightly, still absorbed in the rich feast underfoot. The old oak at the center of the grove draws your eye. Its trunk is so wide and so deeply furrowed that it seems less like a single tree and more like a small community of trunks fused together. Patches of pale green lichen spread across the bark in maps of imaginary countries, and small ferns have found footholds in the crooks of the larger branches, living their entire lives high above the ground. You think about the age of such a tree, the generations of swineherds who have sat on this same log and watched their pigs root beneath these same branches. The thought is not a heavy one. It arrives and passes without leaving any weight, like a leaf dropping onto a stream and being carried away. You are simply one in a long line of quiet watchers, and the oak does not mark your presence any more than it marks the passing of the seasons. It simply stands and grows and drops its acorns, and the pigs come, and the people come with them, and the world turns. The morning deepens. The sun climbs higher, shortening the shadows and warming the air by slow degrees. You loosen the cloth at your neck and push back your hood, letting the light fall directly on your face. The pigs, having covered much of the near half of the clearing, begin to drift toward the far side, where the oak mast lies thickest. You rise not because you need to herd them, but simply to stretch your legs and keep them in view. Your movements are slow, unhurried, matching the pace of everything else in the grove. You walk a short distance along the edge of the clearing, your shoes pressing deep into the leaf litter, and find a new place to lean against a younger oak with smooth, silvery bark. The pigs acknowledge your movements with a flick of an ear or a brief glance, but they do not alter their course. They know you are there, and that is enough. From this new angle, the light falls differently, and you notice details that were invisible from the log. There is a bracket fungus on the side of the central oak, a series of overlapping plates colored in shades of brown and cream, as intricate as any carving. A spider has strung its web between two low branches, and the strands, still beaded with dewdrops, shimmer in a gentle arc. A single acorn detaches from a high limb and falls, bouncing once off a lower branch with a small wooden tick before vanishing into the leaves below. One of the pigs, the black-spotted sow, lifts her head at the sound and then resumes rooting, her decision apparently made that the fallen acorn will wait for her. The pattern of sound and movement is endless, a seamless fabric that requires no intervention, no hurry. You feel the day settle into its rhythm, a rhythm as old as the oaks themselves. The rest of the world, the village, the fields, the wider realms of men and their doings, all seem impossibly distant, separated by more than miles. Here there is only the slow, steady present, the soft percussion of snouts in leaves, the interplay of light and shadow, and the quiet company of beasts who ask nothing of you but your presence. You let your thoughts drift like the mist earlier, formless and slow. You think about the stream back in the village, the way the water sounds different in each season, the way it will be lower now after a dry autumn, but still running clear. You think about the bread and cheese wrapped in the cloth bundle you left by the log, and you know that when midday comes, you will eat it slowly, without haste, sharing a few crumbs with the birds. For now, though, you simply stand and watch, your eyes moving from one pig to the next, your ears filled with the rustle of leaves and the distant coo of the wood pigeon. The morning walk is over, and the long, calm day in the oak grove has begun. The old oak at the center of the clearing is the reason the grove exists, the reason the ground is deep in mast, the reason you and your pigs return here day after day. Its trunk rises from the forest floor like a section of ancient architecture, so wide that you could not circle it with both arms, so massive that 3 men standing with linked hands could not reach around its girth. The bark is not a single surface, but a landscape of its own, ridged and furrowed in deep vertical crevices that run from the root flare all the way up into the lower limbs. Each crevice is deep enough to hide a small bird's nest, and in some of them, generations of tree creepers have done exactly that, tucking their domed homes of moss and spider silk into the protected hollows. The bark plates are thick and corky, some as large as a man's spread hand, and they overlap in irregular patterns like the scales of a sleeping dragon. When you press your palm against the trunk, the surface is rough and cool, textured in a way that speaks of immense age and endless patience. All across this vertical continent of bark, life has found a place to settle. Patches of silvery green lichen spread in circular colonies, their edges crisp and their centers slightly crinkled, like maps of islands seen from a great height. The lichen is a partnership of fungus and alga. Though you do not know these words, you know it simply as a part of the oak, a living garment that changes color with the seasons, now pale gray in the dry weather, turning brighter green after a rain. Near the base of the trunk, where the humidity lingers longest, there are cushions of emerald moss that glow with an inner light when the sun strikes them at the right angle. Tiny ferns, no taller than your smallest finger, have taken root in the crotches of the larger branches and in the deep seams of the bark, their fronds delicate and triangular, trembling in the slightest movement of the air. They live their entire lives without ever touching soil, drinking the rain that runs down the trunk and feeding on the slow accumulation of dust and fallen leaves that the wind deposits in the crevices. The oak does not seem to mind these passengers, it simply grows around them, enclosing their roots in new layers of bark, accepting them as part of its long existence. The roots of the old oak are a marvel in themselves, spreading out from the base in great serpentine coils that dive in and out of the ground like the backs of swimming creatures. Some are as thick as your thigh, covered in the same furrowed bark, and where they emerge from the leaf litter they form natural seats and steps. You have sat in the hollow between two such roots on wet days, sheltered from the drizzle by the overhang of the trunk, and the wood there is smooth and polished by years of contact with wool and leather and human warmth. The ground around the tree is especially rich in acorns because the old oak produces more mast than any other tree in the grove, its heavy, lobed leaves manufacturing nourishment from the sunlight that pours through the canopy gap. The acorns are larger here, plumper, their shells are glossy chestnut brown, and their caps covered in neat, overlapping scales. In a good mast year, the tree drops so many that the ground beneath is nearly paved with them, a thick carpet of nuts that the pigs will work through for hours without exhausting. This morning the pigs are drawn to the base of the old oak as if pulled by an invisible thread. The black-spotted sow is the first to arrive, her broad snout already working before she has even come to a full stop, pushing aside the brittle leaves of last autumn to uncover the fresh acorns that have fallen during the night. There is a particular sound to this rooting, the combination of dry leaf rustle and the deeper crunch of acorn shells cracking between strong molars. It is a sound that never quite repeats itself in the same way twice, because the leaves shift and the acorns roll and the pigs adjust their angle constantly, and yet it resolves into a steady background rhythm that the ear accepts as natural and complete. The sow works in a slow spiral outward from the trunk, her head sweeping from side to side, her snout leaving a shallow furrow in the leaf litter that marks where she has already been. The other pigs fall into their own patterns around her, overlapping circles and arcs that interlock without ever colliding, each animal maintaining a small buffer of personal space while still feeding together as a loose communal group. The young gilt with the torn ear finds a particularly rich pocket of mast near a root elbow, and her grunts take on a deeper, more satisfied tone. The old boar approaches the trunk itself and rubs his massive shoulder against the bark with a slow scraping sound, scratching an itch that has been bothering him since the pen. flakes of dry bark and lichen fall away, adding to the debris on the forest floor, and the boar stands for a moment with his eyes half closed, savoring the relief, before lowering his head and beginning to root with a ponderous, methodical dignity. The smallest piglet stays near its mother, the black-spotted sow, but occasionally darts a short distance away to investigate a fallen twig or a beetle, only to scurry back when it realizes it has strayed too far from the warm, familiar side of its parent. The sound of their collective labor is a continuous, gentle rustling and crunching, layered over with soft grunts and the occasional sharp crack of a particularly hard acorn meeting its end. You lead them to their work and find a comfortable spot against a younger oak at the edge of the clearing. This tree is still ancient by any ordinary measure, perhaps a century or two old, but compared to the central giant it seems almost adolescent, its bark smoother and its trunk straight and true. You settle your back against the silvery grey bark and let your legs stretch out in front of you, crossing your ankles in the deep leaf litter. The position allows you to see the entire herd and the great oak together, a living picture framed by the nearer trunks. The air remains cool but not cold, carrying the freshness of the departed mist and the earthy perfume of decomposing leaves. You pull your cloak a little closer round your shoulders, not because you are chilled, but because the weight of the wool is a familiar comfort, and you let your head rest against the trunk behind you. From this angle, your gaze travels naturally upward, following the lines of the old oak's trunk to the great limbs that spread out above the clearing. The first major branch leaves the trunk at about twice the height of a man, and from there the tree divides into a vast candelabra of limbs that twist and turn and divide again, each branch a smaller echo of the whole. The bark on the upper limbs is somewhat smoother, though still textured, and it shifts in color from deep charcoal to a warmer brown where the sun touches it directly. The leaves are the distinctive lobed shapes of the English oak, each one a small hand of rounded fingers, and they cluster so thickly that the sky beyond is visible only in shifting fragments of blue and white. When the breeze stirs, the entire canopy moves in a slow, fluid motion, the leaves rustling with a sound like distant rain or the pages of a giant book being turned one by one. The light filters through this shifting lattice, and what reaches the forest floor is a moving mosaic of gold and green, ever changing, never still. You watch a single patch of sunlight travel across the moss near your feet, advancing the width of your thumb as the sun climbs higher. The beam illuminates a tiny mushroom that has pushed up through the moss overnight, its cap a pale tan and its stem fragile and white. A small beetle, glossy and black, climbs the stem with slow, deliberate steps, and you follow its progress until it disappears under the mushroom's cap. The world of the grove is full of such small dramas, lives beginning and ending and continuing without any need for your attention, and you observe them with the detached calm of someone who has all day to fill and no tasks more pressing than being present. High above, a leaf detaches from the outermost tip of one of the oak's long branches. It does not fall in a straight line, as a stone might. It spirals, caught by the complex currents of air that move through the canopy, tilting this way and that in a slow, wobbling descent. The leaf is still mostly green, though a wash of pale yellow has begun to creep in from the edges, the first sign of the autumn that is advancing day by day. It twirls past a lower branch, nearly catching on a twig before slipping free, and continues its patient journey downward. You follow it with your eyes, the slow rotation drawing a lazy spiral in the air, until it settles at last on the leaf litter near the base of the old oak, adding itself to the countless others that have fallen before it. One of the pigs, the black-spotted sow, lifts her head at the faint sound of its landing, and her ears swivel forward for a moment before she returns to her rooting, dismissing the leaf as uninteresting. The wood-pigeon calls again from somewhere in the canopy, the same 5-note coo that has been a constant thread through the morning. The sound is soft and round, each note blending into the next, and it seems to come from all directions at once, resonating in the bowl of the grove. You close your eyes for a moment and let the sound wash over you, combined with the rustle of leaves and the steady work of the pig's snouts. When you open your eyes again, the light seems to have shifted slightly, the shadows now a little shorter, the gold in the patches of sun a little deeper. Time passes in the grove without any need for measurement, and you feel no urgency to track its passage. The pigs have widened their circles now, working the ground in concentric rings that radiate outward from the old oak. The leaf litter here is especially thick, a deep accumulation of several seasons, and their snouts must push deeper to find the acorns hidden below. The sound changes as they work through the layers, the dry rustle of surface leaves giving way to a softer, damper sound as they reach the partially decomposed material beneath. There is a scent that rises from this disturbed earth, a rich, sweet mustiness that speaks of slow decay and the endless recycling of the forest floor. It mingles with the clean smell of the oak bark and the faint animal scent of the pigs themselves, creating a composite perfume that is the signature of the grove. You shift your position slightly, drawing one knee up and resting your arm on it, and your attention settles on the old boar. He has found a spot where 2 large roots create a shallow basin filled with acorns, and he is working through this natural bow with an air of deep contentment. His tusks, one long and curved and the other broken off short, glint white against the dark leaves, and his massive head moves from side to side with a slow, powerful rhythm of long practice. Every few moments he pauses, raises his head, and chews with a grinding motion of his jaw, his small eyes looking out at the forest without any particular focus. Then he lowers his head again and resumes his work, the pattern repeating without variation. The young gilt with the torn ear has moved to the far side of the trunk, and you can just see her flank through a gap in the roots. She has discovered a patch of something she likes, perhaps a cache of beet nuts mixed in with the acorns, and her tail gives a small, satisfied flick as she eats. The smallest piglet has grown bolder and is now exploring a fallen branch a few feet from its mother, nudging at the peeling bark with its tiny snout and making small, experimental grunts. The black-spotted sow keeps one ear trained in its direction, but she does not interrupt her own feeding, trusting the safety of the grove and the presence of the herd and the swineherd keeping watch. The oak itself seems to watch over all of them, its great limbs spread in a gesture that could be protection or simply endurance. You think about the acorns that this tree has produced over its long life, the millions of nuts that have fallen and fed swine and squirrels and jays, the handful that have taken root and grown into new oaks in some other part of the forest. The tree does not count its acorns any more than it counts its leaves or its ears. It simply continues, through drought and storm and the turning of centuries, dropping its mast each autumn as it has always done. The thought is a quiet one, not a lesson or a moral, simply an observation that drifts through your mind and then drifts away, leaving no trace. The light continues to strengthen as the morning advances, and the coolness that lingered after dawn begins to retreat. You loosen the cloth at your neck slightly and let the cloak fall open, a hand's width, welcoming the mild warmth. A small breeze stirs the leaves, not strong enough to dislodge any, but enough to create a gentle rustling that sweeps across the clearing in a wave. The pigs, absorbed in their work, take no notice, and the wood pigeon continues its cooing as if the breeze were part of the same quiet song. You feel a deep stillness settle over you, a stillness that is not emptiness but fullness, the grove offering you nothing but the present moment, and asking nothing in return. You lean your head back against the younger oak, feel the solidity of the trunk behind you, and let the slow, steady rhythms of the old oak and its rooting swine fill your senses until the boundaries between watcher and watched grow soft and indistinct. Once the pigs are fully absorbed in their foraging and the morning has settled into its steady, unhurried rhythm, you perform the small ritual that begins every day in the grove. It is not a task that anyone has assigned to you, not a rule written down or a duty demanded, but a habit born of years spent watching over animals in the forest, a quiet practice that keeps the herd whole and your mind at ease. You count the pigs, one by one, letting your eyes move across the clearing in a slow, deliberate circuit, while the animals work the leaf litter in their overlapping patterns. The counting is not a matter of numbers spoken aloud or tallied on fingers. It is a form of recognition, a way of touching each animal with your attention and confirming that all are present, all are well. All are exactly where they should be. You begin with the black spotted sow because she is always the easiest to find, a broad back and the distinctive pattern of dark patches on her pink skin standing out against the bronze and copper of the forest floor. She is the matriarch of the herd in the way that older sows often are, not through aggression or dominance, but through a calm steadiness that the others seem to follow. Her spots are scattered across her flanks like islands on a map, one large patch covering her left shoulder, a smaller one near her right hip, a scattering of freckles across her snout. You have known her since she was a gilt herself, and you have watched her raise litter after litter with patience and competence. This morning she is working the ground near the base of the old oak, her snout pushing through the leaves in a rhythm that never varies, her ears flicking occasionally at a fly or a falling acorn. You let your gaze rest on her for a moment, noting the steady rise and fall of her sides, the glossy sheen of her bristles, the way her tail gives a small satisfied curl as she uncovers a particularly rich pocket of mast. She is accounted for, and you move on. The old boar is the next to draw your eye, simply because of his size. He is the largest pig in the herd by a considerable margin, a massive animal with shoulders like a small hill and a head that seems too heavy for any neck to support, though his neck is thick and powerful and carries the weight with ease. His left tusk curves outward and upward in a pale crescent, worn smooth at the tip from years of rooting and rubbing against roots and stones, while his right tusk is broken short, the result of some long-ago encounter that you never witnessed and can only guess at. Despite his formidable appearance, he is a placid creature, more interested in acorns than in asserting himself, and he spends his days in the grove working through the leaf litter with a ponderous, methodical dignity that the younger pigs lack. This morning he has settled into the shallow basin formed by two large roots on the far side of the old oak, a natural bowl that collects acorns as they fall, and he is working through this private larder with deep, rumbling grunts of satisfaction. His small eyes are half closed, his ears relaxed, his whole posture one of complete contentment. You note his presence, his position, his peaceful state, and you move on. The young gilt with the torn ear is next in your slow census. She's a daughter of the black-spotted sow from a litter 2 springs ago, and she's grown into a healthy, active pig with a curious streak that sometimes leads her a little farther from the herd than is wise. Her torn ear is the result of that curiosity, a small misadventure involving a bramble thicket and a hasty retreat that left a neat V-shaped notch in the rim of her left ear. The wound healed cleanly and has never bothered her, but it serves as a convenient mark, a way to pick her out from the other young pigs at a glance. This morning she has found a patch of ground where the acorns lie especially thick, near a fallen branch that angles down from a younger oak at the edge of the clearing, and she is working with an enthusiasm that borders on joy, her snout moving so fast that leaves fly up in small flurries around her head. Every few moments she pauses, lifts her head, and chews with a rapid grinding motion, her eyes bright and alert, before plunging back into the leaves with renewed energy. You watch her for a moment longer, and then you move on. There are 3 other mature sows in the herd, and you count them as a group because they tend to stay close together, working the ground in a loose cluster that shifts gradually across the clearing. One is a pale, almost cream-colored pig with a pink snout and light bristles that catch the sun and gleam like polished bone. Another is a deep reddish-brown, the color of autumn bracken, with a dark stripe running along her spine. The third is a patchwork of black and white, her markings so symmetrical that they seem almost deliberate, as if she were painted by a careful hand. The 3 of them have been together since they were piglets, and they maintain a quiet companionship, rooting side by side with occasional soft grunts that might be communication or might simply be the sounds of contentment. They are all present, all healthy, all absorbed in their work, and you note their positions near the edge of the clearing before moving on. The younger pigs, the ones born in the spring before last, are more scattered and more active, still possessing some of the friskiness of piglets, while growing into the solid bodies of adults. There are 4 of them, and you pick them out one by one from among the herd. The first is a sturdy barrow with a white patch over one eye that gives him a perpetually surprised expression. He is working near the fallen log where you sat earlier, his snout exploring the mossy crevices where acorns sometimes roll and lodge. The second is a gilt with a black tail and white body, an unusual combination that makes her easy to spot. She is moving along a line of exposed roots, her head sweeping from side to side in the classic pattern. The third is a barrow with a speckled coat, each bristle seeming to alternate between light and dark, creating an overall impression of soft grey. He has found a patch of something particularly tasty near a cluster of ferns, and is eating with his eyes half closed in pleasure. The fourth is a gilt with one floppy ear that never quite stands upright, the other ear pricked forward and alert, and she is the most adventurous of the young pigs, already exploring the edge of the clearing where the undergrowth thickens. You make a mental note to keep an eye on her, though you know from experience that she will not wander far. The pull of the acorns is too strong. All 4 are present, and you move on. The youngest piglet, The one born only a few months ago is the last to be counted and the easiest to lose track of because of its small size and its tendency to disappear behind larger pigs or under low-hanging branches. This morning it is staying close to its mother, the black-spotted sow, as it usually does, but it has ventured a few feet away to investigate a fallen twig with the intense concentration of the very young. The piglet is small enough that you could hold it in both hands, though it would squirm and squeal if you tried, and its bristles are still soft and fine, more like fur than the coarse hair of the adults. Its snout, already perfectly formed, pushes at the twig and then at the leaves beneath it, mimicking the actions of its mother with a seriousness that is almost comical. When the sow grunts, the piglet's ears perk up, and it scurries back to her side, pressing against her flank for a moment before venturing out again. The cycle repeats, and you watch it with the quiet affection that comes from years of tending to generations of pigs. The piglet is present, and the count is complete. 12 pigs, all accounted for, all healthy, all content. You let out a breath that you did not realize you were holding, and your shoulders settle into an even deeper state of relaxation. The counting ritual has served its purpose, not because you expected to find anyone missing, but because the act of paying attention, of touching each animal with your awareness, anchors you more firmly in the present moment. The grove feels complete now, the herd a single breathing entity made up of 12 individual parts, and you are the quiet observer at the edge, the one who holds the whole picture in mind while each pig attends only to its own small circle of leaves. With the count finished, your attention shifts naturally from the individual animals to the collective pattern of their movement, the slow choreography of snouts and hooves that unfolds across the clearing. The pigs do not root in straight lines or in any pattern that a human planner might devise. Their movements are driven by scent and instinct and the subtle cues that pass between members of a herd. And yet there is a rhythm to it, a kind of music that you have learned to hear over the years. Each snout lifts and lowers in its own time, but together they create a steady rolling pulse, a wave of sound that rises and falls like breathing. The rustle of dry leaves is the treble note, the deeper crunch of acorn shells the bass, and the soft grunts that punctuate the work are the rests between phrases. You settle more comfortably against the trunk of the younger oak, and let this rhythm wash over you. The black-spotted sow is working in a tight spiral now, her snout tracing an ever-widening circle around a particularly productive spot. The old boar has shifted his position slightly, his massive head now probing the far end of the root basin. The 3 companion sows have drifted closer together, their snouts nearly touching as they work the same patch from different angles. The young pigs move in looser, more erratic patterns, their attention caught by this or that scent and then released again. The piglet darts back and forth behind its mother like a small fish swimming in the wake of a larger one. The whole picture is one of slow, harmonious industry, a factory of pigs fueled by acorns and operated by instinct. The sound of their rooting is so constant that it becomes, after a while, less a sound than a texture, a layer of the atmosphere as present and as unremarkable as the light or the air. Your ears accept it, and then stop noticing it, the way they stop noticing the distant coo of the wood pigeon after it is repeated enough times. But if you make a small effort, you can bring the sound back into focus, can separate the individual threads from the woven whole. There, that sharp crack is the old boar breaking a particularly hard acorn. That soft, wet snuffling is the young gilt with a torn ear pushing into a damp layer of partially decayed leaves. That rapid, light rustling is the piglet nosing through a pile of dry oak flowers that fell in the spring and have lain undisturbed until now. Each sound is a signature, and together they form a language that you understand without needing to translate. The rhythm of the snouts is matched by the rhythm of the hooves, the slow, steady tread of 12 pigs shifting across the forest floor. The hooves make a softer sound than the snouts, a muffled percussion on the deep carpet of leaves, but it is there, if you listen, a gentle background beat. Occasionally, a hoof strikes a hidden stone or a buried root, and there is a sharper clack that rings out for a moment before being swallowed by the softer sounds. The pigs do not react to these small surprises. They adjust their footing and continue on, their attention fixed on the world of scent beneath their snouts. You notice, after a time, that the pattern of the pig's movements aligns with the contours of the ground, following the subtle dips and rises that you might not see if you were not paying attention. They avoid the exposed roots, stepping over them with a casual grace that belies their bulk. They follow shallow depressions where water once pooled after a rain, places where the acorns might have washed and collected in a dense layer. They skirt the patches of bare earth where the leaf litter is thin and the soil beneath is hard and unyielding. Their choices are not random. They are reading the ground in a language older than words, and they are finding the richest feeding with an accuracy that no human eye could match. The rhythm of the snouts is also a rhythm of time, a way of marking the morning's slow passage without any need for a clock or a sundial. When the pigs are working with steady, unhurried energy, you know that all is well, that the day is unfolding as it should. When they pause, lift their heads, and listen, you know that something has caught their attention, a distant sound or a shift in the wind, and you listen too, your senses joining theirs for a moment before the moment passes and they return to their work. When they begin to slow, their snouts moving more languidly, their grunts growing softer and more spaced out, you know that the morning is advancing toward midday, that the edge has been taken off their hunger, and soon they will be ready for a rest. The pigs are your clock, and their rhythm is the rhythm of the grove, ancient and reliable and slow. You let your eyes close for a moment, not to sleep, but simply to rest them, and you focus entirely on the sound. The rustle of leaves is like the sound of a gentle rain, steady and even, punctuated by the occasional heavier drop of an acorn falling from the canopy above. The grunts are low and throaty, the sounds of animals entirely at ease. The wood pigeon coos its 5-note song, pauses, coos again. A jay calls harshly from somewhere deeper in the forest, a single screech that is not alarming but simply part of the day's music. When you open your eyes again, the light seems warmer, the shadows a little shorter, and the pigs have shifted their positions only slightly, still absorbed in the rich feast underfoot. The rhythm continues, as it has for countless mornings before this one, and as it will for countless mornings after, and you are content to sit and listen, and be nothing more than the one who watches. As the morning deepens and the sun climbs higher, a new layer of sound begins to make itself known, so softly at first that it almost escapes your notice. It is the sound of acorns falling, the sporadic music that comes from the high branches of the old oak and the younger trees that ring the clearing. A single nut will detach from its cap and drop, striking a twig with a small wooden tick, then another, then a lower branch with a deeper thud, before landing at last in the leaf litter with a final muffled tap. Sometimes the descent is swift and direct, a clean plummet that ends in a sharp little crack. Other times the acorn bounces and tumbles through the canopy, creating a cascade of small sounds that ripples outward and fades. The pattern is irregular, unpredictable, governed by invisible currents of air and the slow loosening of stems that have held the nuts since spring, and yet the overall effect is of a gentle, ongoing percussion that weaves itself into the fabric of the day. The pigs are attuned to this music in a way that you are not, their ears pricking at each impact. When a cluster of acorns lets go all at once and patters down through the leaves like a handful of thrown pebbles, several heads will lift at the same moment, snouts pausing in their work, ears swiveling forward to catch the sound. The pause lasts only a heartbeat before the heads lower again, and the rooting resumes, as if the pigs have registered the event and then dismissed it with the calm recognition of a familiar signal. They know that the falling acorns are not going anywhere, that the mast will be there on the ground waiting for them whenever they reach it, and so there is no need to rush toward the sound. The knowledge is built into their bones, the product of generations of swine that have fed beneath these same oaks, and it expresses itself in the unhurried confidence of their movements. You lean forward slightly on your seat against the younger oak, curious to examine the acorns that have fallen closest to you. Within arm's reach there are several half buried in the leaf litter or resting on top of the moss, like small polished eggs. You reach down and collect a few, gathering them in your cupped palm, and then letting them roll gently as you sort through them with your thumb. The shells are smooth and cool to the touch, their color a rich chestnut brown that glows with a faint luster when the sun strikes them. Some are perfectly oval, tapering to a neat point at the tip. Others are more rounded, almost spherical, their caps having been lost in the fall. The caps that remain are works of intricate design, miniature bowls made of overlapping scales that fit the nut exactly, their edges sometimes curled outward in a tiny ruff. You run your fingertip over the scales, feeling their slight roughness, and then you set the acorns aside one by one on the moss beside you, arranging them in a small, neat row. The abundance of the mast this year is remarkable, even by the generous standards of the oak grove. Everywhere you look, the ground is thick with acorns, lying in drifts against the roots and filling the shallow hollows. A good mast year is a gift, a season of plenty that comes unpredictably, and the forest creatures have responded in their various ways. The squirrels have been busy since late summer, racing through the branches and burying caches in every patch of soft earth, their movements quick and urgent as if they feared the bounty might vanish overnight. The jays have been just as active, their harsh calls echoing through the grove as they carry acorns away to their own secret storage places, each bird capable of moving thousands of nuts in a single season. And the pigs, of course, have grown sleek and glossy on the endless feast, their bodies rounding out as the weeks pass, their energy focused entirely on eating and sleeping and growing. You think about the cycle that produces this abundance, the long, slow chain of cause and effect that links the acorn in your hand to the oak above you and the pigs below. The tree has been producing mast for centuries, each autumn a fresh cascade of nuts that represents an enormous investment of energy. Only a tiny fraction of those acorns will ever take root and grow into new oaks. The vast majority will be eaten by pigs and squirrels and birds and insects, their substance converted into flesh and bone and feather and chitin. And yet the tree continues to produce them, year after year, in numbers that seem almost wasteful. There is a kind of generosity in this, a lavishness that does not count the cost, and you find the thought settling in your mind without any need to examine it further. The acorn in your hand is a capsule of potential, a sleeping oak folded into a compact, durable form. If you were to plant it in a patch of open ground and protect it from hungry mouths, it would send down a taproot and push up a stem, and in time it would grow into a sapling, and then a tree, and then a giant like the one that stands at the center of the grove. The process would take lifetimes, more lifetimes than you can imagine, and the person who planted the acorn would never see the full-grown oak. That thought, too, drifts through your mind without leaving any weight, simply another observation among the many that the grove invites. The falling acorns continue their irregular music, and you find yourself listening more closely now, attuned to the variations in the sound. An acorn that drops straight down and lands on bare earth makes a sharp, definitive tap. One that lands on a cushion of moss is nearly silent, the sound swallowed by the soft green fibers. When a nut strikes a root on its way down, there is a brief wooden clatter, a sound like a fingernail tapped against a board. And when several acorns fall in quick succession, disturbed by a gust of wind or the movement of a bird, the sounds overlap into a brief, light drumming that rises and falls away. Each impact is a small event, complete in itself, and yet they accumulate over the morning into a background rhythm as natural as breathing. You watch a single acorn fall from a high branch of the old oak, following its descent with your eyes. It tumbles end over end, catching the light on its glossy shell, and strikes a lower limb with a soft tick, before bouncing outward and disappearing into the leaf litter near the black-spotted sow. The sow, hearing the sound, lifts her head and turns toward the spot where the acorn landed, her snout already questing. She takes 2 steps, roots briefly in the leaves, and crunches the acorn with a satisfied grunt before returning to her previous patch. The whole sequence has taken only a few seconds, but you have watched it with the full attention that the grove seems to draw out of you, a patient, unhurried awareness that has no need to move on to the next thing. Your hand drifts back to the ground and picks up another acorn, this one still wearing its cap. The cap is a tight, scaly dome that covers the top third of the nut, and when you tug at it gently, it separates with a small, dry popping sound, leaving a pale circular scar on the shell. You turn the cap over and examine the inside, which is smooth and slightly concave, lined with fine silky hairs that once cushioned the developing nut. It is a marvel of small-scale engineering, a protective helmet designed to keep the acorn safe from insects and weather until the moment of ripeness, at which point it loosens its grip and allows the nut to fall free. You set the cap down beside the row of acorns and add the shelled nut to the line, completing the small arrangement. The air around you is warm now, the morning coolness having given way to the mild heat of an autumn day. The sun has climbed above the canopy and is pouring directly into the clearing, filling it with a golden light that seems to thicken the air and slow the passage of time. The shadows under the trees have compressed into tight, dark pools around the bases of the trunks, and the moss on the fallen log has dried to a soft, springy texture. You shift your position slightly, leaning back against the oak and stretching your legs out further, and you let the warmth soak into your shoulders and the back of your neck. Your thoughts, freed from any pressing need, begin to wander in the way that thoughts do, when there is nothing to direct them. You think about the mast years you've known, the lean ones when the acorns were sparse and the pigs had to range farther to find their food, the fat ones like this when the ground was so thick with nuts that the pigs barely had to move. You remember a year when the oak flowering was hit by a late frost, and the acorn crop failed almost entirely, and you had to supplement the herd's diet with beech mast and chestnuts gathered from the far side of the forest. That was a hungry autumn, and the pigs grew thin despite your efforts, and the winter that followed was hard. But this year is not that year. This year the oaks have outdone themselves, and the pigs are growing fat on the surplus, and the memory of the lean times makes the present abundance feel even richer. You think about the people who will benefit from this mast year, though they may never set foot in the grove or see the pigs that feed here. The fat on the pigs' backs will become stored energy that will sustain them through the cold months, and when the time comes for slaughter, the meat will be marbled and flavorful from weeks of gorging on acorns. The villagers will eat well this winter, their bellies full of pork and their hearths glowing with rendered fat. The thought is a practical one, rooted in the rhythms of subsistence that shape your life, but it arrives without urgency, simply another link in the chain that connects the old oak to the cottages down the lane. The chain extends outward in all directions, you realize, linking the grove to the wider world in ways that are mostly invisible. The acorns feed the pigs, and the pigs feed the people, and the people tend the land that grows the grain that supplements the pig's diet in the weeks before the mast season begins. The fallen leaves feed the earthworms and the fungi, which break down the organic matter and return nutrients to the soil, which feed the roots of the oaks, which produce more leaves and more acorns. The squirrels bury acorns and forget some of them, and those forgotten nuts become new oaks that will eventually produce mast of their own. The jays carry acorns for miles and drop them in clearings and along hedgerows, extending the reach of the forest one nut at a time. The whole system is a vast, slow-turning wheel of giving and taking, and you are a small part of it, sitting on a mossy log while the pigs root beneath the oaks. A second acorn falls, and then a third, and you realize that a light breeze has picked up, stirring the upper branches and shaking loose the nuts that were on the verge of dropping. The sound of falling acorns intensifies for a moment, a brief flurry of taps and ticks and soft thuds, and then the breeze dies and the music fades back to its previous sporadic rhythm. One of the acorns lands on your log, bouncing once and rolling to a stop against your thigh. You pick it up and add it to the row, which now stretches across the moss in a neat line of 12 nuts, each one slightly different in shape and color, but all of them products of the same patient tree. The pigs have continued their work through all of this, their snouts pushing through the leaves with steady, unwavering rhythm. The black spotted sow has completed her spiral and moved on to a new patch near the edge of the clearing, where the acorns are mixed with beech nuts and the occasional sweet chestnut. The old boar has left his root basin and ambled over to the base of the old oak, where he is now rubbing his shoulder against the bark with a slow scraping motion, his eyes half closed in pleasure. The young gilt with the torn ear has discovered a cache of acorns that a squirrel buried and forgot, and she is eating them with a rapid, eager crunching, her tail flicking back and forth. The three companion sows are still working together, their heads nearly touching, their grunts blending into a low, continuous murmur. The 4 young pigs are scattered across the clearing, each absorbed in its own small world of scent and taste, and the piglet is curled up against its mother's flank for a brief rest, its tiny sides rising and falling in the rapid rhythm of a sleeping infant. The sight of the piglet sleeping reminds you that the morning is advancing, that the pigs have been working for several hours now and will soon be ready for their own midday rest. The sun is nearly at its zenith, and the shadows have shrunk to their smallest extent, and the heat of the day is at its peak. You feel a pleasant drowsiness creeping over you, a heaviness in your limbs that comes from sitting still in the warm sun for too long. You do not fight it. There is no need to stay alert, no danger to watch for, no task that requires your immediate attention. You let your eyelids droop and your breathing slow, and you allow the sounds of the grove to wash over you without any effort to distinguish them. The falling acorns tap and thud, the pigs rustle and crunch, the wood pigeon coos its endless five-note song, and you drift in a state somewhere between waking and sleep, aware of everything and focused on nothing. The acorn you are holding slips from your fingers and rolls down to join the others on the moss, and you do not pick it up. The row of 12 acorns sits there on the log beside you, a small testament to the abundance of the season and the patience of the oaks, and you let them be, your thoughts slowing until they are as still and quiet as the grove itself. The first sign of the rain is not a sound but a change in the light, a subtle shift from warm gold to a cooler, flatter silver that you notice without consciously registering. The shadows that were sharp and dark only moments ago begin to soften at their edges, and the bright patches of sun on the forest floor lose their intensity, becoming diffuse pools of pale illumination rather than sharp-edged coins of light. You look up through the canopy, and where the sky was a clear, washed blue, it is now a layer of uniform grey, the colour of unspun wool, moving in from the west with the slow, stately progress of a season changing its mind. The birds have noticed too, the wood pigeon falling silent for the first time all morning, the smaller birds withdrawing deeper into the trees, and the forest seems to hold its breath, waiting. The first drops fall without any announcement, a few scattered taps on the leaves high above that are so light and so few that they could be mistaken for falling acorns or the footsteps of some small creature moving through the branches. Then the taps multiply, and the sound resolves into the unmistakable whisper of rain on foliage, a soft, sustained hiss that grows steadily as the drops become more numerous and more confident. The rain is not a storm, not a sudden downpour, but a gentle, steady drizzle, the kind of rain that can last for hours and does not so much fall as drift downward through the air, each drop small and fine and closely spaced. The canopy of the old oak receives the rain first, its thousands of leaves turning the individual drops into a collective mist that filters through the layers of foliage before reaching the ground, and what arrives on the forest floor is a softened version of the rain, gentler and slower than the drops that fall in the open fields beyond the trees. The pigs take no notice of the change, beyond a momentary flick of their ears, as if the rain were no more remarkable than a passing breeze. Their bristled backs bead with moisture almost immediately, the water forming tiny silver droplets that sit on the coarse hairs without penetrating, and after a few minutes their coats have taken on a glossy sheen that makes them look like animals carved from polished stone. The black-spotted sow continues her rooting without the slightest pause, her snout pushing through the now damp leaves with the same steady rhythm as before. The old boar, who had been rubbing his shoulder against the oak trunk, finishes his scratching and ambles back to his root basin, lowering his massive head to the ground with a deep grunt of satisfaction. The rain running in small rivulets down his flanks and dripping from the curve of his tusks. The young gilt with the torn ear shakes her head once, sending a spray of water flying, and then resumes her eager foraging, apparently untroubled by the wet. You, however, are less indifferent to the rain than the pigs, and you pull the hood of your cloak up over your head, drawing the wool forward until it forms a small shelter that frames your face. The cloak is made of thick felted wool that has been treated with lanolin, and it sheds water effectively, the drops beading on the surface and rolling off rather than soaking in. You gather the edges of the cloak around your body and shift your position on the ground, moving from your spot against the younger oak to a place beneath the dense shelter of the old oak itself, where the overlapping leaves form a natural roof that is nearly impenetrable. The ground here is dry, or at least drier than the open clearing, a small patch of leaf litter that has been shielded from the rain by the immense spread of the branches above. You settle yourself against one of the great roots, feeling the solid dry bark against your back, and you arrange your legs comfortably in front of you, your shoes resting on the cushion of leaves. The sound of the rain is different here under the old oak, more complex and layered than it was at the edge of the clearing. Above you, the rain hisses on the canopy, a steady white noise that fills the upper air. Below that, there is a secondary sound, the slower, more irregular drip of water collecting on leaves and then falling in larger drops to the leaves below. And at ground level, there is the soft patter of the rain that has made it all the way through, landing on the leaf litter with a gentle, continuous tap that is quieter than the sound above. The three layers blend together into a single soothing whole, a rain music that is both constant and ever-changing, the volume rising and falling slightly as the intensity of the drizzle waxes and wanes. The earthy scent of the grove intensifies in the rain, the dry, musty smell of decomposing leaves giving way to a richer, deeper fragrance, the smell of wet soil and damp wood, and the clean, green note of living moss drinking in the moisture. There is a sweetness to it as well, the faint, nutty perfume of the acorns, and underneath, everything the cool mineral smell of the rain itself, the scent of water that has travelled from some distant sea and fallen on this particular patch of forest. You breathe in deeply, letting the air fill your lungs, and the smell is so vivid and so pleasant that it seems to settle something inside you, some small tension that you had not been aware of holding. The light under the oak has gone soft and silvery, the diffuse illumination of an overcast sky filtered through wet leaves, and it makes the grove look different than it did in the sun, more muted and more intimate. The colours have deepened, the greens of the moss and the ferns becoming more saturated, the browns of the bark and the leaf litter turning darker and richer. The droplets of water that cling to every surface catch what little light there is and glint like tiny glass beads, and the air itself seems thicker, more substantial, as if the rain has made the invisible visible. You watch a single drop form at the tip of a leaf just above your head, the water gathering slowly, swelling until its weight overcomes its grip on the leaf, and then releasing to fall in a brief silver streak that vanishes into the leaves at your feet. The pigs, seen through the veil of rain, have become softer-edged versions of themselves, their outlines blurred by the mist that the rain creates as it strikes the ground. They move through the clearing like shapes in a dream, their grunts and snuffles reaching you through the sound of the rain as if from a great distance, though they are only a few dozen paces away. The black spotted sow is working the edge of the root basin now, her snout pushing through the damp leaves with a wet, squelching sound. The old boar has settled into a patch of particularly rich mast, his massive body nearly motionless, except for the slow sweep of his head. The young gilt with the torn ear has moved closer to the center of the clearing, where the rain falls a little harder, but she seems not to mind, her energy undiminished. The three companion sows have drawn together under the shelter of a younger oak, their bodies nearly touching, their snouts working the ground in a small, concentrated area. The 4 young pigs are scattered as usual, and the piglet has pressed itself close to its mother's side, using her bulk as a shield against the rain. You notice that the rain has begun to form tiny channels on the forest floor, following the contours of the ground and tracing the paths of least resistance. A small rivulet has formed near your feet, no wider than your finger, and it carries a few fragments of leaf and a single acorn cap, moving them along with the patient, inexorable force of water. You watch the rivulet as it winds its way between roots, disappearing under a cushion of moss and then emerging again on the far side, its course shaped by the invisible topography of the ground. Another rivulet has formed near the base of the old oak, this one larger and faster, carrying a heavier load of debris, and it flows toward the edge of the clearing, where the ground slopes away toward the stream in the village. The rain is connecting the grove to the wider watershed, you realize, linking this small patch of forest to the distant river and ultimately to the sea, though the thought is a distant one, barely formed before it dissolves. The wood pigeon, silent since the rain began, coos once from somewhere in the canopy, a tentative sound that seems to ask whether the rain is over yet. It is not over, and the pigeon falls quiet again, waiting. A small brown bird, a wren perhaps, flits out from the shelter of a fern and lands on a low branch near your head, its feathers fluffed against the damp. It regards you for a moment with a bright black eye, decides that you are not a threat, and then begins to preen, working its beak through its wet feathers with quick, efficient movements. You watch the bird without moving, and the bird ignores you without fear, the two of you sharing the shelter of the old oak in a temporary truce of convenience. The rain continues, steady and patient, and you feel the cold begin to creep in at the edges of your awareness, a slight chill on your cheeks and the backs of your hands. The cloak is doing its work, keeping your body warm and dry, but the air itself is cooler now, the temperature having dropped by several degrees since the rain began. You draw the cloak a little tighter and tuck your hands inside, feeling the warmth of your own body trapped in the wool. The cold is not unpleasant, merely another texture in the rich fabric of the day, and you accept it in the same way that you accept the sound of the rain and the smell of the wet earth. Time passes, though you do not measure it, and the rain continues without change, a steady, unwavering drizzle that seems as if it could go on forever. The pigs have adjusted fully to the wet conditions, their rooting now accompanied by wet, squelching sounds as their snouts push through the saturated leaf litter. The droplets on their backs have merged into a continuous sheet of moisture that makes their bristles lie flat, revealing the contours of their muscles and the curves of their ribs. They look smaller in the rain, sleeker, more streamlined, as if the water has compressed them slightly. And yet they continue to work, driven by the same hunger that has driven them all morning, The rain, no more a deterrent than the sun, was an invitation. You let your head rest back against the oak root, feeling the solid, reassuring presence of the tree behind you. The root is thick and strong, a continuation of the trunk that dives down into the earth like an anchor, and it vibrates faintly with the life of the tree, the slow, steady movement of water and nutrients from root to leaf and back again. The rain is part of that cycle, the water soaking into the ground and being taken up by the roots, traveling through the trunk and the branches to the leaves, where it will be released back into the air through the tiny pores that cover each leaf's surface. The tree is drinking the rain even as you shelter beneath it, and the thought is a comforting one, a reminder that the world is arranged in patterns of deep and patient cooperation. The small rivulet near your feet has grown slightly, its flow now steady and clear, and it has carved a shallow channel in the leaf litter, exposing the dark, rich soil beneath. The soil is full of small things, fragments of decayed leaves and tiny roots, and the pale threads of fungal mycelium that run through the forest floor like a hidden nervous system. You watch the water flow over this miniature landscape, and you feel a sense of quiet contentment settle over you. The contentment of being dry while the world is wet, of being sheltered while the rain falls, of having nothing to do and nowhere to be except exactly where you are. The rain patters on the leaves, the pigs root and grunt, the wren finishes its preening and flies away, and you remain, a still point in the slow wet afternoon. The rain does not end so much as it slowly exhausts itself, the steady hiss on the leaves above gradually thinning until it is no more than a few scattered drops, and then those too cease, leaving behind a deep, listening silence. The clouds overhead begin to break apart, their grey uniformity cracking into separate billows that drift eastward, and through the gaps the sun reappears, paler than before but still warm. The first beam of light that reaches the clearing lands on the wet trunk of the old oak, turning the dark bark to a rich, glistening bronze, and then the light spreads, touching the moss and the ferns and the steaming backs of the pigs with a gentle, golden hand. The warmth coaxes steam from the forest floor, thin wisps of vapor that rise from the saturated leaf litter and curl lazily in the shafts of sunlight. The whole grove seems to exhale, releasing the moisture it has absorbed, and the air grows humid and soft, filled with the scent of wet earth and warmed moss and the faint, sweet breath of the oaks. The droplets that cling to every surface begin to shrink and vanish, evaporating back into the air from which they came, and the colors of the grove shift once more. The deep, saturated greens and browns of the rainy hour giving way to brighter, warmer tones as the light returns. The pigs, who have worked steadily through the rain without complaint, begin to slow as the warmth settles over them. It is a gradual change, almost imperceptible at first, the rhythm of their rooting growing a little more languid, the pauses between snoutfuls a little longer. The black-spotted sow is the first to stop entirely, lifting her head with a soft grunt and standing motionless for a moment, her ears drooping, her eyes half closed. She has been working since before dawn, and the combination of a full belly and the warm sun on her back has tipped her from hunger into drowsiness. She takes a few slow steps toward the base of the old oak, where a patch of ground has been warmed by the sun and dried by the sheltering canopy, and she lowers herself onto the leaf litter with a deep, satisfied groan, her legs folding beneath her, her heavy body settling into the earth. The old boar follows soon after, his massive head lifting from the root basin where he has spent the morning, his jaws working slowly on the last acorn he uncovered. He ambles toward the same sunny patch, his movements ponderous and unhurried, and he circles once before, flopping down beside the sow, his great body hitting the ground with a soft thud that sends a few leaves fluttering. His eyes close almost immediately, and his breathing deepens into the slow, steady rhythm of approaching sleep, his sides rising and falling like a bellows working at its lowest setting. The young gilt with the torn ear holds out a little longer, her youthful energy resisting the pull of drowsiness, but even she eventually succumbs. She roots half-heartedly at a patch of leaves near the edge of the clearing, her snout moving more and more slowly, until at last she simply stops, stands still for a long moment, and then walks over to join the others. She wedges herself between the sow and the boar, her smaller body seeking the warmth of the larger animals, and she too closes her eyes and lets her head sink down onto the leaves. The three companion sows arrive together, as they have done everything together all morning, their cream and reddish-brown and black and white bodies forming a single, multicolored mass as they settle into the growing heap. The four young pigs follow, the barrow with a white eye patch, the gilt with a black tail, the speckled barrow, the gilt with the one floppy ear. All of them slowing, stopping, and then drifting toward the pile of warm, steaming bodies, as if drawn by an irresistible gravity. They find their places in the heap, nuzzling and adjusting until each one is touching at least one other, and then they too close their eyes and let go of the morning. The smallest piglet is the last to surrender, and it does so only because its mother has already lain down, and it has no choice but to follow. It trots over to the heap, its tiny hooves making a soft, rapid pattering on the wet leaves, and it circles several times before finding a spot pressed against its mother's belly, the warmest and safest place in the grove. It curls up there, its small body rising and falling in the rapid rhythm of infant sleep almost before it has finished settling, and the herd is complete, 12 pigs in a single steaming pile of contentment. You watch the slow collapse of the herd from your seat under the old oak, and you feel a sympathetic drowsiness spreading through your own limbs. The rain has left the air fresh and cool, but the sun is warm and the combination is perfectly balanced, neither too hot nor too cold. You push back your hood, letting the light fall on your face, and you feel the pleasant ache of a morning spent sitting still, the stiffness in your shoulders and the slight numbness in your legs. It is time for your own rest, time to eat the food you brought and then to do nothing at all. The cloth bundle lies beside you on the root, a square of undyed linen tied at the corners, and you reach for it now, unknotting the ties with the slow, deliberate movements of someone who has no need to hurry. The linen falls open, revealing the simple meal inside, a wedge of dark bread, a piece of hard cheese wrapped in a separate scrap of cloth, and a small apple with a dull red skin. You have carried this same meal to the grove many times before, on many mornings, and the familiarity of it is a comfort, a small constant in a life of constants. You take the bread first, lifting it from the cloth and holding it in both hands. It is a dense, heavy bread made from rye flour mixed with a little barley, baked in the village oven until the crust is dark and chewy and the crumb is close-textured and slightly sour. You tear off a piece with your fingers, the crust resisting for a moment before giving way with a small satisfying crackle, and you put the piece in your mouth and begin to chew. The flavor is deep and earthy, with a faint bitterness from the rye and a tang from the long fermentation, and you chew slowly, letting the bread soften and dissolve, savoring the simple pleasure of eating after a morning of fasting. The cheese comes next, a wedge of hard, pale yellow cheese that has been aged in the cool of the dairy until it is firm and crumbly and sharp on the tongue. You break off a small piece and eat it with the next bite of bread, the richness of the cheese complementing the sourness of the rye, and the combination is so satisfying that you close your eyes for a moment, focusing entirely on the taste. The cheese has a slight graininess, a texture that comes from the long aging, and it leaves a pleasant sharpness at the back of your throat that lingers after you swallow. A pair of small brown birds, sparrows perhaps, have appeared among the roots near your feet, hopping from twig to twig with quick, jerky movements. They have learned that where a human sits and eats, crumbs are likely to fall, and they watch you with bright, expectant eyes, their heads cocked at an angle. You tear off a small corner of the bread, a piece no larger than your thumbnail, and crumble it between your fingers, scattering the bits on the ground a little distance from your foot. The birds dart forward, pecking at the crumbs with rapid, precise motions, and then they retreat to a safe distance to eat what they have collected, their tiny beaks working the bread into manageable pieces. You take another bite of bread and cheese, and then you pick up the apple, turning it over in your hand to examine it. The skin is a dull, dusty red, not the bright, polished red of apples that have been rubbed clean, but the natural color of a fruit that has ripened slowly on the tree. There are small brown speckles near the stem, spots where the skin has been touched by the sun or by a passing insect, and the stem itself is a short woody nub that still clings to the fruit. The apple is not large, fitting easily in your palm, and it is slightly lopsided, one side a little fuller than the other, the mark of a fruit that grew without any human intervention to shape it. You bite into the apple, and the sound it makes is a crisp, sharp crack that cuts through the soft ambient noise of the grove, a sound so clean and distinct that it seems almost out of place among the rustling leaves and the distant bird calls. The flesh of the apple is white and juicy, with a faint green tint just under the skin, and the flavor is a balance of sweetness and tartness that makes your mouth water. You chew slowly, the juice running down your chin a little, and you wipe it away with the back of your hand before taking another bite. The apple is good, the best kind of apple, the kind that tastes like autumn itself. You eat the apple down to the core, turning it in your fingers to get at the last of the flesh, and then you examine the core with mild curiosity. The seeds are visible through the pale, papery chambers, small brown teardrops arranged in a star pattern, and you think for a moment about planting them somewhere, starting a new apple tree that might one day bear fruit for someone else. But the thought passes, and you toss the core gently toward the edge of the clearing, where it lands among the ferns and will feed whatever small creature finds it first. The birds have finished their crumbs and have flown back into the branches overhead, where they sit and preen and make soft, chittering sounds of contentment. The pigs are still asleep, their breathing a low, continuous rumble that underlies the other sounds of the grove, and one of them, the young gilt with the torn ear, twitches in her sleep, her legs moving briefly as if she were running through some pig dream. The old boar snorts once and then settles deeper into the leaves, his massive head resting on the soul's flank. You gather the remains of your meal, folding the linen cloth and tucking it back into the pouch at your belt, and then you settle yourself more comfortably against the oak root. The sun is warm on your face and hands, and your stomach is pleasantly full, the bread and cheese and apple combining into a deep, contented satisfaction that spreads through your body. You feel your eyelids growing heavy, the weight of the morning pulling at you, and you do not resist. There is no need to stay awake, no reason to fight the drowsiness that the sun and the food and the quiet have brought. The pigs are sleeping, the birds are resting, the grove itself seems to be drifting into the slow, suspended hour of midday, and you allow yourself to follow. You close your eyes, and the world contracts to the small circle of your immediate senses. The sound of the pigs breathing, deep and steady. The warmth of the sun on your skin. The rough, solid pressure of the oak root against your back. The faint, lingering taste of apple on your skin. The rough, solid pressure of the oak root against your back. The smell of wet earth and warm leaves, and the clean, sharp scent of the cheese still on your fingers. These sensations blend together into a single, seamless awareness, and you let yourself float on it, not sleeping exactly but not fully awake either, suspended in a state between the two. The wood pigeon coos again from somewhere in the canopy, the 5-note call softer now, as if the bird too is feeling the weight of midday. A light breeze stirs the leaves, a single gentle breath of air that passes through the grove and then is gone, leaving stillness in its wake. The sun continues its slow arc across the sky, the shadows shifting by imperceptible degrees, the light sliding from one patch of moss to the next. The pigs snore and twitch and dream their pig dreams. And you, the swineherd, the watcher, the quiet presence at the edge of the clearing, you let go of the morning and drift into the deep, peaceful rest that the grove has been promising since dawn. The pigs sleep on, a heap of warm, breathing bodies that steams gently in the midday sun, and the grove settles into the deep quiet of the afternoon rest. The wood pigeon has fallen silent. The smaller birds have retreated into the shade, and even the insects seem to have paused their endless buzzing, leaving only the faint rustle of leaves when the lightest of breezes stirs the canopy. You are not asleep. Not quite, but you are not fully awake either, floating in that comfortable space between rest and awareness where your thoughts move slowly and your limbs feel heavy and warm. Your hands, however, are restless in the way that hands can be when the rest of the body is still, and after a time you reach out and pick up a piece of fallen wood from the ground beside you. The stick is a length of ash, broken from a larger branch by some winter storm, and then weathered by a season of rain and sun, until its bark has loosened and begun to peel away in thin, curling strips. Ash is a good wood for carving, pale and straight-grained, neither too hard nor too soft, and it yields to a sharp blade with a clean, satisfying smoothness. You turn the stick over in your hands, feeling its weight and its balance, noting the slight curve near one end where the branch once grew toward the light. It is not a remarkable piece of wood, just a common fallen stick of the kind that litters the forest floor in countless numbers. But your fingers find it pleasing, and you decide to keep them occupied with it while the pigs sleep and the afternoon drifts by. The knife is a small one, kept in a leather sheath at your belt, its blade worn thin by years of use and sharpening. The handle is smooth wood, darkened by the oils of your hand, shaped to fit your grip in a way that no other hand would find quite right. You draw the knife from its sheath, the blade making a soft, metallic whisper against the leather, and you settle the stick across your knee, angling it so that the light falls across the spot where you intend to begin. The The first cut is always the most deliberate, the blade finding its angle, and then sliding forward with a controlled, steady pressure that you have learned over many afternoons, just like this one. The shaving curls up from the blade in a thin, pale ribbon, so thin that the light shines through it and turns it the color of honey. It clings to the stick for a moment before falling away, and you watch it drift down to land on the leaves at your feet, where it joins the other small debris of the forest floor. The second cut follows the first a little longer, a little smoother, and then the third, and before long your hands have found their rhythm, the blade pushing forward, the wood yielding, the shavings falling in a slow, steady rain of pale curls. This is an old pastime, something you have done since you were young and first learning to use a knife, and it has never been about making anything useful. The stick will not become a tool or a toy or a piece of craftsmanship. It will simply become a smoother stick, a piece of wood that has been shaped by your hands and your attention, and nothing more. The value of the work is in the work itself, in the slow, repetitive motion and the quiet focus it requires. Your mind, freed from the need to plan or decide, settles into the rhythm of the blade, and the world contracts to the small space between your hands. The sound of the carving is a soft, steady scraping, barely audible over the breathing of the pigs and the distant hum of the forest. It is a companionable sound, the kind of sound that fills a silence without disturbing it, and it blends with the other noises of the grove so completely that after a while you stop hearing it as a separate thing. The blade moves across the wood, the shavings fall, and the stick grows slowly smoother under your fingers, the rough, weathered surface giving way to the pale, clean wood beneath. You pause after a time to examine your progress, running your thumb along the spot where you have been working. The wood is smooth now, the grain visible as a series of fine, parallel lines that run the length of the stick, and the color has lightened from the grey-brown of the weathered surface to a warm, creamy white with a faint golden undertone. The transition between the carved area and the untouched bark is a small, sharp step, and you run your thumbnail along it, feeling the edge. Then you shift the stick in your hands, find a new angle, and begin again, the blade biting into a fresh patch of bark and peeling it away. The pigs shift in their sleep, a collective rustle of bristles and leaves as one of them, the young gilt with the torn ear, rolls onto her side and kicks out a leg before settling again. The old boar snorts, a deep rumbling sound that vibrates in his chest and then fades, and the black-spotted sow twitches in the air at a fly. The heap of sleeping animals is a landscape in miniature, a range of rounded hills and valleys made of flesh and bristle, and it changes slowly as the pigs breathe and shift and resettle, a slow-motion avalanche of comfort. Around you, the forest has begun to stir again, the midday lull giving way to the more active afternoon. A woodpecker drums somewhere to the east, a rapid, mechanical tapping that echoes through the trees and then stops, leaving a silence that seems deeper than before. A few moments later, the drumming starts again, a different rhythm this time, and you picture the bird clinging to a dead trunk, its head a blur of motion, its beak chiseling into the wood in search of insects. The sound is a punctuation mark in the longer sentence of the afternoon, and it comes and goes without any pattern that you can discern. Insects buzz in the warm air, their high, whining drone rising and falling in cycles. A dragonfly, its body a slender needle of iridescent blue, darts across the clearing and hovers for a moment near the sleeping pigs, before zipping away on wings that are too fast to see. Small flies dance in the shafts of sunlight. Their movements a complex, chaotic ballet, and a bumblebee, round and furry and seemingly too heavy for its delicate wings, lumbers from one wildflower to the next at the clearing's edge, its buzzing a deeper, more resonant note than the flies. The wildflowers at the edge of the clearing are the last of the season, a few late blooms of knapweed and scabious, and the tall, flat-topped clusters of yarrow. Their colors are muted, the purples and pinks faded to pastels by the long summer, but they still draw the bees and the occasional butterfly, and you watch a small copper butterfly land on a knapweed head and open its wings to the sun. The wings are a brilliant orange, edged with a fine black line, and they tremble slightly in the light breeze, catching the light and then losing it as the butterfly adjusts its angle. The butterfly stays for a long time, or what seems like a long time, and then it rises, flutters a few inches, and lands on the next flower, beginning the process again. Your hands have continued their work while your attention wandered, the blade moving across the wood with the autonomy of long habit, and when you look down you see that you have cleared the bark from nearly half the stick, exposing the pale, smooth wood beneath. The pile of shavings at your feet has grown into a small, curling mound, and a few of the thinner curls have blown away on the breeze and scattered across the clearing. You brush the shavings from your knee and turn the stick over, beginning on the other side, the blade finding its angle and then pushing forward in that same steady, controlled motion. The grain of the wood is beautiful up close, a series of fine, parallel lines that record the growth of the branch year by year. The lines are closer together on one side, where the wood grew more slowly in the shade of the larger branches, and farther apart on the other side, where the sun reached more directly. The pattern tells a story of seasons and light, and the slow, patient work of photosynthesis, and you trace it with your thumbnail, feeling the subtle ridges and valleys that the blade has not yet smoothed away. You think about the ash tree that produced this stick, somewhere in the forest, a tree that you have probably walked past 100 times without noticing. It would be a tall, straight tree with smooth grey bark and compound leaves that turn a pale yellow in the autumn before falling. Its wood is strong and flexible, good for tool handles and cart shafts and the longbows that the archers use, and its branches, when they fall, become sticks like this one, waiting to be picked up and carved into nothing in particular. The ash tree does not know that its fallen branch is now in your hands, any more than the oak knows that its acorns are feeding the pigs. But the connection is there, a web of relationships that binds the grove together in ways that are mostly invisible. The woodpecker drums again, closer this time, and you look up to see if you can spot it. The sound is coming from a dead oak at the edge of the clearing, a tall skeletal trunk that lost its leaves years ago and now stands as a pale monument to decay and renewal. The woodpecker is a large bird, black and white with a flash of red on its head, and it is clinging to the trunk with its strong feet, its body braced against the wood as it hammers at a soft spot. You watch it for a while, the rapid, rhythmic motion of its head, the chips of rotten wood that fly from the hole it is making, and then it pauses, tilts its head, and flies away. Its flight a series of swooping dips and rises that carries it into the deeper forest. Your attention returns to the stick, which has grown smoother and more refined under your patient work. The rough bark is gone now, the entire surface reduced to clean, pale wood, and you have begun to round off the broken end, tapering it into a blunt point. The point will never pierce anything, will never serve any practical purpose, but the shaping of it is satisfying in a quiet way. The slow transformation of a random piece of forest debris into something that has been touched by human hands and human attention. The sun has moved across the sky while you carved, and the shadows have stretched and shifted, the bright patch where the pigs are sleeping now dappled with the shade of the oak's lower branches. The warmth of the day is at its peak, a gentle enveloping heat that makes the air feel thick and slow, and you feel a bead of sweat trace a path down your temple and along your jaw. You wipe it away with the back of your wrist, and then return the knife to the wood, the blade moving with the same steady, meditative rhythm that it has held all afternoon. The stick is nearly done now, or as done as it will ever be, its surface smooth to the touch and its shape refined into a pleasing, simple form. You run your fingers along its length, feeling the places where the grain rises and falls, the slight irregularities that the blade could not or did not remove, and you find that you are satisfied with it, content to have spent the time in this quiet, undemanding way. You set the stick aside on the root beside you, next to the row of acorns you arranged earlier, and you wipe the blade of your knife clean on a patch of moss before sliding it back into its sheath. The grove hums around you, the low, continuous note of the forest's afternoon life, and you let your hands fall still in your lap, the carved stick resting beside you as a small, tangible record of the time that has passed. The pigs are beginning to stir one by one, their sleep ending as gradually as it began, and you know that soon they will rise and resume their rooting, and the day will move into its later chapters. But for now, you simply sit, your hands quiet, your mind quiet, and you listen to the hum of the wood. The pigs rise one after another, not all at once, but in a slow, meandering sequence, as if the decision to wake and move spreads through the heap of sleeping bodies like a ripple across a still pond. The black-spotted sow is the first, lifting her head with a soft grunt and blinking her small eyes against the angled light. She shifts her weight, her legs unfolding beneath her in stages, and then she pushes herself upright with a deep, groaning exhalation, her bristles shedding a shower of dried leaf fragments and bits of moss. The old boar follows, his massive form rising with a ponderous rocking motion, and he shakes his entire body from snout to tail, a tremor that starts at his shoulders and travels backward in a wave. The young gilt with the torn ear springs up more quickly, her youthful energy returning in a sudden burst, and she snorts and paws at the ground as if the long nap had never happened. One by one, the 3 companion sows, the 4 young pigs, and the smallest piglet all stir and rise, their bodies uncurling, their snouts already beginning to twitch with the memory of acorns. The heap dissolves into a loose, milling cluster of animals, and the clearing that was so still and quiet during the midday rest begins to fill again with the sounds of movement and purpose. You remain seated against the oak root for a little while longer, the carved stick still resting beside you, your hands relaxed in your lap. The sleep that you drifted through has left you feeling rested in a way that is more than physical, a deep quietude that seems to have soaked into your bones, and you are in no hurry to move. The warmth of the sun has shifted while you rested, no longer falling directly on your face, but slanting across the clearing in long golden bars that illuminate the far side of the grove and leave your spot in a soft, cool shade. The angle of the light tells you that the afternoon is well advanced, that the sun has crossed its zenith and begun its slow descent toward the western horizon, and that the day has entered its later, gentler phase. You push yourself to your feet at last, your legs a little stiff from sitting so long, and you stretch your arms above your head, feeling the pleasant pull of muscles that have been still for too long. Your cloak falls back from your shoulders, and you leave it open, the air now cool enough to be refreshing, but not yet cold. You pick up the carved stick and set it on the root beside the row of acorns, a small collection of objects that marks your presence here, and then you step out from under the shelter of the old oak and begin a slow circuit of the clearing. The ground underfoot has changed since the morning, the rain-soaked leaf litter now dried to a springy, resilient mat that gives slightly with each step and then rebounds when you lift your foot. The scent of wet earth has faded, replaced by the dry, spicy smell of autumn leaves and the clean, resinous odor of the oaks. The light that falls through the canopy is deeper and richer than it was at noon, the gold of late afternoon, and it touches each surface with a gentle, flattering glow that makes the ordinary seem precious. The bark of the trees is no longer grey and brown, but a warm amber where the sun strikes it, and the moss glows with an emerald intensity that seems almost artificial. The ferns that grow in the crotches of the old oak are backlit by the low sun, their fronds turning into translucent green lace, every vein visible, every serration outlined in light. You walk slowly, your hands clasped behind your back, your pace matching the easy meandering tempo of the afternoon. The pigs have returned to their rooting, and their energy is fresh again, their snouts pushing through the leaves with renewed vigor after the long rest. The black-spotted sow has reclaimed her spot near the base of the old oak, working the ground in a slow, methodical sweep, and the old boar has ambled over to a new patch near the edge of the clearing, where the acorns have piled up against a fallen branch. The young gilt with the torn ear is moving in quick, darting bursts, her curiosity leading her from one spot to another, and the three companion sows are working together as always, their bodies forming a loose triangle that shifts and rotates as they progress. The four young pigs are scattered widely, exploring the far reaches of the clearing, and the smallest piglet is once again shadowing its mother, its tiny snout mimicking her every movement. The sound of their rooting is the same as it was in the morning, a steady rustle and crunch that forms the bass line of the grove's music, but the quality of the sound has changed subtly. The leaves drier and more brittle now, their rustle sharper and crisper than it was in the damp of the morning, and the rain. The acorns, too, seem drier, their shells cracking with a brighter, cleaner snap, and the pigs' grunts have taken on a satisfied, almost lazy tone. The sounds of animals that are eating not from hunger, but from a deep, instinctual drive that will never be fully sated. You pause near the edge of the clearing and look back toward the old oak, seeing the whole grove from a new angle. The afternoon light has transformed the space, painting it in shades of gold and copper and bronze that were invisible in the flat illumination of midday. The leaves that remain on the trees are no longer the uniform green of summer, but a patchwork of colors, some still green, others shading into yellow and orange, and the first hints of russet. The leaves that have already fallen, the ones that carpet the ground, are a deeper mosaic, a dense, woven fabric of brown and tan and gold, and here and there a splash of vivid red where a maple or a dogwood has contributed its own brilliance to the oak-dominated palette. The whole forest floor is a tapestry, and you are walking across it, your feet pressing into the layers of color, your passage marked by the faint crunch of dry leaves giving way beneath your weight. The shadows have lengthened dramatically since noon, stretching out from the bases of the trees like dark, elongated reflections. The shadow of the old oak reaches nearly to the far side of the clearing now, a broad, irregular pool of cool darkness that ripples over the roots and the leaf litter and the sleeping bodies of the pigs that are no longer there. Where the shadow falls, the colors are muted and the air is cool, and where the sun still reaches, the colors are vivid and the air is warm, and the boundary between the two is a sharp, moving line that creeps across the ground with the slow, inexorable pace of the earth's turning. You step across that boundary from shadow into light, and you feel the immediate warmth on your face and hands, a gentle golden heat that has none of the intensity of noon, but all of its sweetness. You stand still for a moment, letting the sun soak into you, and you watch the way the low light illuminates the edges of the fallen leaves, turning each one into a tiny, glowing ember. The fine network of veins in each leaf, the intricate branching pattern that once carried water and nutrients, is now visible as a delicate, darker tracing against the translucent gold, and you find yourself bending down to pick up a single leaf, an oak leaf with 5 rounded lobes and a short, woody stem. The leaf is dry and brittle, its edges curling inward, its surface a mottled map of brown and gold, and a faint, lingering green near the center vein. You hold it up to the light, and the sun shines through it, revealing the intricate architecture of its internal structure, the thousands of tiny cells that once were filled with chlorophyll and are now empty, their work done for the season. The leaf is a record of the summer that has passed, the rain and the sun and the gentle breezes, and it will soon become part of the soil, feeding the tree that produced it in a cycle that has no beginning and no end. You let the leaf fall from your fingers, and it spirals down in a slow, wobbling descent, joining the others on the ground. The pig snouts are ploughing through these same leaves, pushing aside the layers to reach the acorns hidden beneath, and you can see the darker, cooler earth that their rooting exposes, the rich, black soil that is the foundation of everything in the grove. The disturbed earth has a smell of its own, a sweet, musty scent of decomposition and renewal, and it mingles with the dry spice of the leaves and the clean, sharp note of the cooling air. You breathe in that complex, layered fragrance, and it settles in your lungs like a promise of the season to come. You continue your slow circuit, walking along the perimeter of the clearing where the oaks meet the undergrowth, and you notice the small details that you missed earlier in the day. There are mushrooms pushing up through the leaf litter, pale, delicate caps on slender stems. Their gills are soft, pinkish brown. There is a spider web strung between 2 ferns, its strands catching the light and turning it into a tiny rainbow. The spider itself, a small dark knot at the center. There is a fallen branch covered in a velvety green moss that is softer than any fabric, and you run your fingers over it as you pass, feeling the cool, damp texture. There is a cluster of acorns that a squirrel has gathered and then abandoned, their caps still attached, their shells unbroken, a small hoard of forgotten treasure. The light continues to shift as you walk, the sun sinking lower, the shadows stretching longer, the gold deepening toward amber and then toward a soft, rosy copper. The temperature has dropped by another degree or 2, and the air has taken on the crispness that heralds the approach of evening, a faint, clean chill that makes your skin prickle slightly and your breath come a little more visibly. You draw your cloak a little closer, not because you are cold, but because the gesture is a comfort, a small acknowledgement of the changing hour. The pigs, sensing the shift in the air perhaps, have begun to root with a new intensity, as if they know that the daylight is finite and that the acorns must be eaten now before the darkness comes. Their movements are quicker, their snouts plunging deeper, their grunts more frequent and more emphatic. The black-spotted sow has moved to a new patch where the acorns are particularly dense, and she is eating them with a steady, rhythmic crunch that never varies. The old boar has positioned himself directly under the old oak, where the falling acorns are still tapping down at intervals, and he catches them as they land, his massive jaws crushing them with a single efficient motion. The young gilt with the torn ear is racing from spot to spot, as if she cannot decide which acorn to eat next, and the smallest piglet is pressed close to its mother, eating whatever she uncovers. You find a new place to stand, near the fallen log where you sat in the early morning, and you lean against it, your arms resting on the mossy surface. The moss is cool and damp under your forearms, and it smells of earth and rain and the slow, patient work of decay. From this vantage point you can see the whole clearing laid out before you, the pigs moving through the golden light like creatures in an old painting, the oaks standing around them in a protective circle, the sky above visible through the thinning canopy as a pale, clear blue that is beginning to blush with the first hints of sunset. The wood pigeon coos again, its 5-note call sounding different in the late afternoon, softer and more drawn out, as if the bird itself is growing sleepy. A flock of rooks passes high overhead, their harsh conversational calls drifting down through the branches, and you watch them wheel and circle and then disappear beyond the treetops, heading toward their evening roost. The small birds have begun their dusk chorus, a scattered, intermittent twittering that fills the spaces between the other sounds, and somewhere in the distance a thrush is singing, its notes clear and liquid, and surprisingly loud in the quiet of the grove. You stay there for a long time, leaning on the log, watching the light fade from gold to amber to a deep, burnished copper that seems to set the whole forest on fire. The leaves that were glowing with transmitted light now seem to glow from within, their colors intensifying as the sun approaches the horizon, and the shadows have merged into a single continuous darkness that pools under the trees and spreads outward like a rising tide. The air is cooler now, cool enough that you can feel it on your cheeks and the tips of your ears, and the smell of the grove has changed again, the dry spice of the leaves now mixed with the cool, clean scent of the approaching evening. The pigs are slowing once more, their intense late afternoon feeding tapering off as their bellies fill and the light begins to fail. The black-spotted sow lifts her head and stands still, her ears swiveling, her snout testing the air. The old boar ambles over to the base of the old oak and rubs his shoulder against the bark one last time, a slow scratching motion that seems to mark the end of the day's work. The young gilt with the torn ear has stopped her racing and is now standing quietly beside the 3 companion sows, all of them facing the same direction, their bodies aligned as if they are waiting for something. The 4 young pigs are drifting back toward the center of the clearing, and the smallest piglet has climbed onto the root where its mother is standing, its tiny hooves barely finding purchase. The whole grove feels suspended in a peaceful amber haze, a moment of perfect stillness between the activity of the day and the rest of the night. You push yourself away from the log and walk slowly back toward the old oak, your feet crunching on the leaves, and you gather up your carved stick and the cloth bundle that held your meal, tucking them away. The pigs watch you approach, their eyes calm and expectant, and you know that they are ready, that the long, slow day in the oak grove is drawing to its natural close. When the light has faded to a deep, dusky gold, and the shadows under the oaks have merged into a single pool of cool darkness, you know that the day has reached its natural turning point, the moment when the forest shifts from the wakefulness of afternoon to the quiet of evening. The pigs have slowed their rooting to a desultory, half-hearted pace, their snouts moving through the leaves more from habit than hunger, and their grunts have become softer and more intermittent, the sounds of animals that are full and content and ready to return to the safety of their pen. You step away from the fallen log where you have been leaning and walk to the center of the clearing, your feet finding the familiar path without any need for conscious direction. And when you reach the open space near the old oak, you stop and take a slow breath, filling your lungs with the cool, dry air of the autumn evening. The call that you give is not a shout or a whistle, but a low, soft humming note, a sound that starts deep in your chest and rises into the quiet air with the gentleness of a breath. It is a sound that the pigs have known since they were piglets, a sound that means safety and guidance in the end of the day's wandering, and it carries across the clearing with a subtle, carrying quality that the forest does not swallow. You hold the note for a long moment, letting it resonate and fade, and then you repeat it, a second time and a third, each hum a little shorter than the last, the sequence as familiar as the rhythm of your own heartbeat. The black-spotted sow lifts her head at the first note, her ears swiveling forward, her snout pausing in its work and then withdrawing from the leaves. She stands still for a moment, listening, her small eyes finding you in the dim light, and then she gives a low grunt of acknowledgement and begins to amble toward you, her heavy body swaying with the slow rolling gait of a pig that has eaten well and walked far and is now ready for rest. The old boar hears the call and turns from the root basin where he has spent the last hour, his massive head swinging around, his tusks glinting faintly in the fading light. He takes a step toward you and then pauses, as if considering whether he might stay just a little longer, and then the call comes again, and he relents, falling in behind the sow with a ponderous, dignified tread. The young gilt with the torn ear is the next to respond, her head popping up from a patch of ferns where she has been exploring, her torn ear flicking as she locates the source of the sound. She trots toward you with a quick, eager step, her youthful energy still not entirely spent, and she circles once around the sow and the boar before settling into a position on their flank. The three companion sows lift their heads in unison, their cream and red-brown and black and white bodies disentangling from the loose cluster they have maintained all day, and they move toward you as a group, their hooves making a soft, steady percussion on the leaf litter. The four young pigs, who had scattered to the far edges of the clearing, come trotting back in a loose, straggling line, the barrow with the white eye patch leading the way, the gilt with the black tail close behind, the speckled barrow and the floppy-eared gilt bringing up the rear. The smallest piglet, who has been dozing against its mother's side, wakes with a start and scrambles to its feet, its tiny legs working furiously to keep up as the sow moves toward you. You stand still in the center of the clearing while the herd assembles around you, their warm bodies pressing close, their bristles brushing against your legs, their breath rising in soft, visible plumes in the cooling air. You count them silently, the same ritual as the morning, touching each one with your attention, the black-spotted sow, the old boar, the young gilt with the torn ear, the three companion sows, the four young pigs, the smallest piglet. All 12 are present, their bodies forming a loose milling ring around you, their snouts lifted toward your face, their ears alert and forward. You give the low hum one last time, softer now, a note of acknowledgement and reassurance, and then you turn and begin to walk toward the path that leads out of the grove. The pigs follow without hesitation, falling into a loose column behind you, their hooves rustling through the leaves in a steady, rhythmic chorus. The black-spotted sow takes the lead position just behind your heels, her massive body filling the path, and the others arrange themselves behind her in an order that has been established by habit and hierarchy over many seasons. The old boar walks near the rear, his slower pace setting the speed for the whole group, and the young gilt with the torn ear darts back and forth along the line, checking on the stragglers and then hurrying forward again. The smallest piglet stays pressed against its mother's flank, so close that it sometimes stumbles when she changes direction, and the 3 companion sows walk side by side, their shoulders nearly touching, their grunts soft and conversational. The path through the forest is dimmer now than it was when you walked it this morning, the canopy overhead reduced to a dark lattice against a sky that has deepened from pale blue to a rich, luminous violet. The last light of the sun is no longer visible, but its afterglow still colors the western horizon, a band of pale gold and soft rose that filters through the trees and gives just enough illumination to make the path visible. You walk slowly, your feet finding the familiar contours of the ground, your eyes adjusted to the dimness, and you feel the cool air on your cheeks and the backs of your hands. A pleasant, bracing chill that sharpens the senses without being uncomfortable. The forest has changed its voice with the approach of night, the daytime chorus of birdsong and insect hum giving way to the quieter, more intermittent sounds of the evening. The wood pigeon has fallen silent at last, its 5-note coo now absent from the canopy, and the smaller birds have tucked themselves into their roosts and ceased their chittering. In their place the first bats have emerged, appearing as small dark shapes that flicker and dart among the branches, their flight a series of rapid, erratic turns that seem almost too quick for the eye to follow. You watch one bat skim low over the path ahead, its wings a silent blur, and then it veers upward and disappears into the darkness between the trees. Another bat follows, and another, a small squadron of hunters emerging from their daytime hiding places to feed on the insects that rise from the forest floor in the cool of the evening. The pigs take no notice of the bats, their attention fixed on the path ahead and the familiar scents that guide them home. Their snouts still dip occasionally to sample the ground, but the rooting is half-hearted now, more a matter of habit than necessity, and they move forward with a steady, purposeful gait that speaks of a long day's work completed. The sound of their hoofs on the path is a soft, muffled percussion, the leaves and the damp soil absorbing the impact, and their breathing is deep and even, the breathing of animals that are tired in the best way, the tiredness that comes from a day spent in the open air with full bellies and no stress. The path emerges from the deep forest and enters the belt of younger trees that fringes the cleared land, the oaks giving way to hazel and hawthorn and the occasional silver birch. The sky opens up here, the canopy thinning, and the afterglow of the sunset is more visible, a broad wash of pale gold and soft lavender that stretches across the western horizon and fades upward into a deep velvety blue. The first stars are beginning to appear, tiny pinpricks of light that are barely visible at first, and then grow steadily brighter as the sky darkens. You glance up and see the evening star, a single brilliant point of light low in the west, and you make a small silent acknowledgement of its presence before lowering your gaze to the path again. The hedgerows that line the lane are dark, tangled masses, their leaves still holding the day's warmth and releasing it slowly into the cooling air. The scent of hawthorn and bramble, and the faint, sweet smell of late honeysuckle drifts across the path, mingling with the clean, mineral odor of the stream that you can hear now, its murmur growing louder as you approach the village. The pigs sense the nearness of home, and their pace quickens slightly, a subtle increase in tempo that you feel rather than see. The column behind you compressing a little as the animals press forward. The village appears gradually through the trees, a cluster of dark shapes against the lighter sky, and then you round the last bend in the lane, and it opens up before you, the single street of packed earth lined with small cottages and byres, and the low sloping roofs of the storehouses. The hearth fires have been lit, and the thin ribbons of smoke rise from the chimneys in pale, curling columns that glow faintly orange where the firelight catches them from below. The smoke smells of oak and beech, and the sweet, resinous scent of pine kindling, and it drifts across the lane in slow, drifting layers that mingle with the cool evening air. You breathe in that familiar, comforting smell, the smell of home and warmth and the end of the working day, and you feel a deep sense of satisfaction settle over you, the satisfaction of a day fully lived and a task fully completed. The village is quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after the day's work is done, but before the true stillness of night. You hear the distant bleat of a goat from one of the byres, a single plaintive note that rises and falls and then fades, and the low rumbling answer of a cow from the shelter at the end of the lane. A door opens somewhere to your left, a rectangle of warm orange light spilling out onto the street and then vanishing as the door closes again. And you hear the soft murmur of voices, a man and a woman speaking in the low, unhurried tones of evening conversation. A dog barks once, a single, sharp sound that is more announcement than alarm, and then it falls silent, its duty done. The sounds are all familiar, all woven to the fabric of your daily life, and they wrap around you like a blanket as you walk the last stretch of the lane. The pig's pen stands at the side of your cottage, the woven hazel hurdles, sturdy and familiar in the dim light, the small shelter in the corner, a dark, inviting shape. You reach the gate and lift the wooden bar from its notched posts, swinging it inward, and then you step aside and let the herd flow past you into the enclosure. The black-spotted sow enters first, a massive body brushing against the gatepost, and she makes directly for the shelter, where the straw is deep and dry and warm. The old bull follows, pausing to rub his shoulder against the gatepost with a slow scratching motion, and then he ambles into the shelter and settles down with a deep, rumbling groan. The young gilt, with the torn ear, trots in eagerly, circling several times before flopping down in the straw, and the three companion sows enter together, their bodies forming a single multicolored mass as they arrange themselves in the shelter. The four young pigs follow, jostling for position, and the smallest piglet scampers in last, pressing itself against its mother's side just as it has done all day. You linger at the gate for a while, leaning on the top rail, watching the pigs settle into their nightly routine. They root briefly in the straw, pushing it into comfortable mounds and hollows, and then one by one they lie down, their bodies relaxing, their breathing slowing. The soft grunts and sighs that accompany this process are the sounds of deep contentment, the sounds of animals that are safe and warm and full, and they blend together into a low, continuous murmur that is as soothing as any lullaby. You count them one last time: the black-spotted sow, the old boar, the young gilt with the torn ear, the 3 companion sows, the 4 young pigs, the smallest piglet, all 12 present and accounted for, and then you push yourself away from the gate and turn to the small tasks that remain. The water bucket hangs on its peg beside the pen, a sturdy wooden pail with a rope handle, and you lift it down and carry it to the stream. The path to the water is short, a worn track that leads down a gentle slope to where the stream runs clear and cold over a bed of smooth stones. You kneel at the edge and dip the bucket, feeling the chill of the water through the wood, and you wait while it fills with a soft, gurgling sound. The stream is the same stream that you heard this morning in the dark before dawn, the same constant watery whisper, and it will be here tomorrow and the day after that, flowing on through the village and down to the river and out to the distant sea. You lift the full bucket, the water sloshing gently against the sides, and you carry it back up the slope to the pen, where you pour it into the wooden trough. The pigs, already half asleep, do not stir, but they will drink when they wake in the cool of the night, and the water will be there for them. You hang the bucket back on its peg and check the fastening on the gate, making sure the wooden bar is secure in its notches, and then you stand for a moment with your hands on the top rail, looking at the dark shapes of the sleeping pigs. The night has fully arrived now. The last trace of sunset faded from the sky, and the stars are bright and numerous overhead, scattered across the heavens like the acorns on the forest floor. The air is cold now, cold enough that you can see your breath when you exhale, and you draw your cloak tightly around your shoulders and turn toward the cottage. The door of the cottage is low and heavy, made of thick planks that have been darkened by years of smoke and weather, and it swings open with a familiar creak. Inside, the fire has burned down to a bed of glowing embers, and the room is warm and dim and filled with the faint, pleasant smell of wood smoke and dried herbs and the lingering traces of the morning's bread. You cross the room and add a small log to the embers, watching as the flames lick up around the dry wood and then settle into a steady, gentle burn, the light flickering on the walls and the beams overhead. The pot of pottage has been left at the edge of the hearth, a thick stew of barley and beans and a few scraps of salted pork, and you ladle a portion into a wooden bowl and eat it slowly, sitting on the low stool beside the fire, the warmth soaking into your tired legs and the food settling comfortably in your stomach. When the bowl is empty and the spoon set aside, you bank the fire for the night, pushing the embers together and covering them with a layer of ash so that they will smolder until morning. You rise from the stool, your body heavy with the pleasant tiredness of the day, and you cross the room to the straw mattress that lies in the corner, the blankets already turned down and waiting. You remove your shoes and set them beside the bed, and you loosen the drawstring of your trousers and pull the tunic over your head, folding it and laying it on the chest. The air is cool against your skin, but the blankets are thick and warm, and when you slip beneath them, the tiredness washes over you in a slow, gentle wave. Lying in the dark, you let your mind drift back over the day without effort, not reviewing or cataloguing, but simply allowing the images to rise and fall like the breath in your chest. the mist curling around your ankles on the morning path, the spreading branches of the old oak against the pale sky, the sound of acorn rain tapping through the leaves, the steam rising from the backs of the sleeping pigs in the midday sun, the carved stick, smooth and pale, resting beside the row of 12 acorns, the low soft call that brought the herd together, and the twilight walk home along the familiar lane. The images come and go, and you do not cling to any of them, simply letting them pass through you like the stream water through the village. Outside the cottage, the world is settling into the deep quiet of the night. An owl calls from somewhere in the forest, a single soft hoot that hangs in the air and then fades, and then another answers from farther away. The stream murmurs its endless watery song, and the pigs shift in their straw and sigh in their sleep, their bodies warm and safe in the shelter of the pen. The stars wheel slowly overhead, and the earth turns toward the dawn that is still hours away. And you, the swineherd, the watcher, the quiet presence at the edge of the grove, sink into a sleep that is deep and dreamless and full of peace. The cottage settles into the deep quiet of the night, a stillness that is not empty, but full of small, gentle sounds that you have known since childhood. You lie still beneath the blankets, your body sinking into the straw mattress that has shaped itself to your contours over many seasons, and you feel the pleasant tiredness of the day settling into your bones like a slow, warm tide. The fire in the hearth has been banked for the night, the embers pushed together and covered with a layer of ash, and the last faint glow that painted the ceiling beams with orange light has faded to a dim, ruddy spark that is barely visible in the darkness. The room around you is a familiar collection of shadows, the wooden chest by the wall, the low stool beside the hearth, the pegs where your cloak and tunic hang, all of them known to you so well that you could reach out and touch any of them, even with your eyes closed. The air inside the cottage is warm and still, carrying the faint mingled scents of wood smoke and dried herbs, and the trace of the pottage you ate, and it wraps around you like a second blanket, holding you in a cocoon of comfort. Outside the cottage, the world has settled into its own nightly rhythm, a rhythm that is older than the village and older than the oaks and as steady as the turning of the stars. The pigs are in their pen, the 12 of them arranged in the deep straw of the shelter, their bodies pressed together for warmth in a single breathing mass. You can hear them if you listen, the soft grunts and sighs that punctuate their sleep, the occasional rustle of straw as one of them shifts position or kicks out a leg in a dream. The black-spotted sow has claimed her usual spot against the back wall of the shelter, her massive body forming a bulwark against the cold, and the smallest piglet is curled into the curve of her belly, its tiny sides rising and falling in the rapid rhythm of infant sleep. The old boar lies near the entrance of the shelter, his position a habit of guarding even though there is nothing to guard against, and his breathing is a deep, rumbling bass note that underlies the other sounds. The young gilt with the torn ear is sprawled on her side, her legs extended, her torn ear flicking occasionally at some dream fly, and the 3 companion sows are nestled together in a tangle of cream and red-brown and black and white, their heads resting on each other's flanks. The 4 young pigs are scattered around the edges of the heap, and the whole enclosure is a picture of deep, uncomplicated peace. The gate of the pen is secure, the wooden bar fitted snugly into its notched posts, and you can picture it clearly in your mind without needing to rise and check. The water trough is full, the bucket hanging on its peg beside the gate, the rope handle coiled neatly over the wood. All the small tasks of the evening have been completed, all the duties of the swineherd laid to rest until the morning, and there is nothing left to do but lie still and let the night carry you towards sleep. The sounds from outside filter through the cottage walls, muted by the wattle and daub, softened by the thatch of the roof. The stream is the most constant of these sounds, a distant murmur that never entirely fades, a watery whisper that has been running through the village for longer than anyone can remember. It rises and falls in volume as the breeze shifts, or as some obstruction momentarily alters its flow, but the overall effect is of a continuous, soothing presence, a sound that your ears have learned to accept as part of the background of life. You can trace the course of the stream in your mind, from the spring in the high pasture above the forest, down through the rocky channel where the watercress grows, past the alder grove and under the little wooden bridge, through the village where the women fill their buckets in the morning, and then on toward the lower meadows and the river and the distant sea. The stream is a thread that connects the village to the wider world, and its sound is a reminder that the world continues, even in the darkness, patient and unhurried. The owl calls again, a single soft hoot that hangs in the air and then fades into the silence. The call comes from somewhere near the edge of the forest, perhaps from the old oak itself, where the owl has a roost in a hollow limb. You picture the bird perched on a branch, its round, pale face turning slowly as it scans the clearing for the small movements of mice and voles, its feathers so soft that its flight makes no sound at all. The owl is a creature of the night, a hunter that moves through the darkness with a silence that is almost magical, and its call is a punctuation mark in the long sentence of the night. After a pause, a second owl answers from deeper in the forest, its hoot slightly higher in pitch, and the two calls alternate for a while, a slow, deliberate conversation that carries across the treetops and then fades away. The pigs do not stir at the sound. They have heard owls every night of their lives and know that the birds pose no threat to them. The stream murmurs on, and the quiet returns. You shift slightly under the blankets, turning onto your side and drawing your knees up toward your chest, the position you have favored for sleep since you were a child. The straw mattress rustles beneath you, a soft, dry sound that is itself a kind of lullaby, and the blanket settles around your shoulders with a comfortable weight. Your eyes are closed now, and the darkness behind your eyelids is a deep, velvety black that seems to stretch on forever. You let your breathing slow, matching the rhythm of the sleeping pigs, and you feel the day's experiences settling into your memory like leaves settling onto the forest floor. The images come without effort, not as a sequence, but as a collection of impressions that drift through your awareness one by one. The mist curling around your ankles on the morning path, turning the familiar trees into soft, dreamlike shapes. The old oak standing at the center of the grove, its trunk a continent of bark and lichen, its branches spreading overhead like the arms of a patient giant. The sound of acorns falling, the irregular tap and thud that wove itself into the fabric of the morning. The rain arriving softly, its gentle hiss on the leaves, the way the drops beaded on the pig's bristles and turned the forest floor into a world of silver and green. The warmth of the midday sun on your face as you sat against the oak root, the taste of bread and cheese, and the crisp, sweet bite of the apple. The feel of the carving knife in your hand, the smooth, pale wood emerging from beneath the weathered bark, the pile of shavings curling at your feet, the late afternoon light turning the grove to amber and gold, the shadows stretching long and cool across the clearing. And then the call to return, the low hum that gathered the herd, the walk home along the darkening lane with the pigs moving before you in a slow, contented column. These images do not replay like a story, they simply exist, fragments of a day that was full and good, and now is over. You do not cling to them or try to arrange them in order. You let them come and go, each one drifting through your mind and then dissolving like a cloud passing across the moon. The carved stick is still out there, resting on the root beside the row of 12 acorns, and the thought of it brings a small, quiet satisfaction. Tomorrow you might pick it up again, or you might leave it where it is and find another stick to work on. It does not matter. The carving was never about the result, only about the doing. The night deepens around the cottage, the darkness becoming more complete as the hours pass. The stars that were scattered across the sky when you walked home have shifted now, wheeling slowly in their immense, silent dance, and the moon has risen somewhere beyond the trees, though its light does not reach through the shuttered windows. The air outside is cold, cold enough that a frost might form before dawn, and you can feel the chill pressing against the walls of the cottage, held at bay by the lingering warmth of the hearth and the thick insulation of the thatch. The pigs in their pen will be warm enough, their bodies generating a steady heat as they sleep pressed together, and the straw will hold that heat through the coldest hours of the night. The pen was built with the winter in mind, the shelter angled to block the wind, the walls thick and tight, the floor raised above the damp ground. The pigs will be comfortable, and the knowledge allows you to rest without worry. Your thoughts, already slow and drifting, begin to loosen their grip on the specifics of the day and move toward the more general currents of your life. You think about the seasons, the way the year turns from spring to summer to autumn to winter and back again, each season bringing its own tasks and its own rhythms. The mast season is autumn's gift, a time of plenty when the oaks give their abundance and the pigs grow fat and sleek. After the mast season comes the slaughter, the careful work of turning pigs into pork, hams and bacon, and sausages that will hang in the smokehouse and feed the village through the dark months. Then the winter, with its short days and long nights, the pigs that are kept for breeding spending their time in the shelter, eating hay and turnips and whatever acorns you gathered and stored. Then the spring, when the sows farrow and the new piglets arrive, small and wet and already searching for the teat. Then the summer, when the pigs are turned out into the forest to forage for roots and grubs and the first green acorns. And then autumn again, the mast falling, the cycle continuing. The fault of the cycle is not a heavy one, it is simply the shape of your life, the pattern that your days have followed since you were old enough to hold a stick and walk behind a sow. You do not question it or wish for something different. You accept it as naturally as the oaks accept the changing seasons. The grove will be there tomorrow, and the day after, and the year after that, the old oak dropping its acorns for generations of swineherds yet to come. And you are content to be one small part of that long, slow story. The owl calls again, closer this time, and you imagine it gliding over the cottage on silent wings, its shadow passing across the moonlit thatch. The stream murmurs its endless song, and a light breeze stirs the thatch and then dies away. The embers in the hearth give a final soft crackle, a sound that is more felt than heard, and then they too fall silent. The cottage is still, the village is still, the whole world is still, and you are floating on the edge of sleep, your mind no longer forming words or images, your body heavy and warm and utterly relaxed. The last thing you are aware of, before awareness itself dissolves, is the sound of the pigs breathing in their pen, the deep, steady rhythm of 12 animals at rest. It is a sound you have heard every night of your adult life, a sound as familiar as your own heartbeat, and it reaches you through the darkness like a thread of continuity, linking this night to all the nights that have come before and all the nights that will follow. You let the sound wash over you, and you let go of the day, let go of the thoughts, let go of the watcher who sat beneath the old oak while the acorns fell. The sleep that rises to meet you is deep and dreamless and full of peace, a sleep that has been earned by a day spent in the quiet company of oaks and swine, and you sink into it without resistance, the stream murmuring and the stars wheeling and the world turning gently toward the dawn.